seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Don't back down, double down. Don't back down, double down.
Yes, and yes again, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday night. It is Bustalgia time. I've missed you all because this is the first time I've been on in 5 days, which might be a bit of a record for me on this channel. So I've been missing all the comments, missing all the interactions with you, but I'm back, folks. I'm back on the Bustalgia tour. You know, we're going on a lot of time travel tonight, and as we did a few weeks ago, I said we're going to throw this in here on the series on the Celtic Years. It's not just going to be necessarily a season we concentrate on. We're going to have player-specific ones, and this is episode number 2 of the player-specific ones. It's about the gift from God himself, as Lubomir Moravcik we'll be focusing on tonight, and his time at Celtic. So yeah, during the comments tonight, make sure you get all your memories in as well, because there's a lot of good stuff to talk about with Lubo. But as you can see, I've got my time-travelling team with me tonight. So as usual, our man in Canada, Canada's favourite Tim, Liam Greenlaw. How you doing, mate?
I'm great, Phil. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely smashing, mate. Absolutely smashing. And I must also say, no, this is not a Partick Thistle top. It is a Valencia top from like the 1970s or something. So contrary to this, it's not Partick Thistle. Like, I don't have any other Scottish retro shirts other than Celtic. I have no reason to wear any other retro Scottish teams other than Celtic. Yeah, it's Valencia. And of course, we're also joined by making his second appearance in a row, Johnny Logue, mate. Oh, hot off the heels of your appearance last night. Top work as well on the TNF. Welcome back, though, mate, on the Bustalgia tour. Are you excited about tonight, mate? How are you doing?
I am. You've got to be excited about talking about somebody like Lubo. And I'll just point out, this is not an Ange jumper I've got on. This is just a cheap Primark jumper that I put on to keep you warm when the nights start getting a bit cooler down here, like, you know. Don't maybe put the heating on too soon in the year with the fuel crisis and whatnot. But yeah, just a cheap Primark jumper and not the Ange. David hasn't got me the new Ange jumper for my Christmas as yet. Hopefully that's on his list.
Hopefully so. Liam, do you wish to dispel anything tonight? You know, I've already dispelled the shirt I'm wearing. Johnny's done. Have you got anything you wish to dispel before we get started? No?
Oh, no, I'm good. But tell you what, see our podcast tune, like our opening credit sequence, I don't think there's a better of the business right now. You should be getting an award for that.
Oh, aye. Oh, it's award season for what I hear as well in the podcast world. Interesting. That one you brought up. Very topical. Well done, Liam. Get that one in there. But before we get started, as I often say, I think all the good stuff out the way. So as usual, remember, if you're new on the bus, first time, welcome along. Come on the bus. Hit the subscribe button if you like the content that you see. Also hit the like button. comment, share, get involved in the live chat, all that good stuff. And as well, you'll see down in one of the corners, you see a Hoops raffle logo. Check them out on Twitter and Instagram for the chance to win very unique Celtic prizes at Hoops Raffles, our official partners here on the Boys Say Bus. Now, gentlemen, as always, we have to start Bustalgia with a wee bit of trivia, a wee trivia question to get the mind going. And of course, we always come back to the answers at the end of the show. And I've tried to be a bit topical here because obviously we are doing an episode on Lubo. So I had to try and find something about him to try and come up with a question. And here is an interesting one. There are only 4 answers, but gonna have to dig a bit deep on this one. Gonna have to dig a wee bit deep. So the question is this tonight. Lubomir Moravcik is fondly remembered for scoring his first Celtic goals in a victory over Rangers. Since Lubo did that, there have been 4 other Celtic players who scored their first goals for the club in matches against Rangers or Sevco, depending who you speak to, and depending what time they scored it at, because after 2012, obviously, I need to get that in there. So I'm looking for the 4 players that have scored in fixtures against Rangers, old and new, as their first Celtic goals. Since Lubo did it in 1998, there's been 4 of them, and they're pretty tough. I'm going to say it right now. There is some real tough ones in there. So there we go.
I thought I had an easy one there from it, but now I'm thinking it was the first goal for Celtic against Rangers, not
the very first goal they scored for the club was against Rangers. That's Lubo that achieved that. But I say there's 4 more since then that have done that, with their first goal in a Celtic shirt also happened to be in the Glasgow derby as well. So it's not necessarily their debut. Keep that in mind as well. That might throw people. I don't mean that this was their debut for the club. First time they put the ball in the net for the club was against Rangers. But yeah, there's 4 of them. And somebody in the comments has already said one of them, but I'll keep it to the end. I will keep it to the end.
Is one of them Mark Birchall?
It's not Mark Birchall. You're wrong. I had to double check that one. Mark Birchall scored a goal before he scored in that 5-1 game that Lubo scored in. He actually scored a goal before that against like Dundee United or something. I had to just double check because he was on my list. Is he going to be an answer? It turns out he's not. But it's a good shout. But I say we'll come back to the 4 at the end. Right. You're going to have to get your brain thinking on that one. But yeah, folks, let me just get into the old banners and tee it up. So yeah, let's get into talking about Lubomir Moravcik, the gift from God, because that should be a good one. So yeah, Lubo. Actually, before obviously I send over my notes to the guys before we do the show, maybe a couple of days before, and there's a few links on there as well, YouTube videos. One of them is the DVD, or maybe even it was a VHS at the time, I imagine. The gift from God. That the club did, the official sort of documentary of him. So that's up there on YouTube. So that's definitely a good source material, shall we say, for this episode here. But yeah, I gave that a watch, and obviously just looking up all his different stats on like Celtic Wiki. But yeah, he obviously started his career in the old Czechoslovakia, because obviously Czechoslovakia is now broken up into Czech Republic and Slovakia. But yeah, he's from the city of Nitra, which now is in Slovakia, and that's the first club that he played for, FC Nitra, in the 1983. He made his debut in 1983. That's how long ago it was. Wow, going back there. But yeah, he was there for a good few years between 1983 and 1990. 119 appearances and 30 goals. But the thing that he's put him on the map was he made a move to off the back of appearing at the 1990 World Cup for Czechoslovakia, because he played in Italian 90. He made a move to France to play for Saint Etienne. Now, he had quite big shoes to fill, it turns out, because a few years before he moved to Saint Etienne, they had one Michel Platini playing for them. Platini's on record as saying, I've got the quote about him. Platini said, "Everyone knows the story of Lubo Moravcik. He remains a massive hero at St Etienne, where he filled my number 10 jersey." And it wasn't quite right after it. It was a few years after it, but you'd see Platini saying my number 10 jersey. Good ego there, Michelle. Then he built his own legend. I saw footage of him running the game against Juventus in the season's Champions League 2001. That was amazing. At his age, fans all over the country remember the goals he scored against their teams year in, year out. I also remember Lubo as a top-class international footballer. Celtic fans will have their own special memories, no doubt. But yeah, Liam, we'll come to you first, mate. That is some pretty big shoes to fill, I suppose, Michel Platini. He is regarded maybe one of France's best players.
Right.
Definitely up there anyway.
It's also when France had a really good team as well. I mean, the French national team was starting to come on really, as a significant power, because through the 80s and that, they really, the early 90s, they wanted that, powerful a team, nothing compared to like Germany and that. And French football was also as well. It was like their club teams were starting to make impacts in Europe as well. So, for him to be, a legend, somewhat a legend of French football, and the fact that he still wasn't in many of our radar at that point as well, just shows you what a good league they had at the time. But Platini, that was big boots to fill.
It was indeed. And of course, there is the quote as well, which is one of those ones that I think over time, Chinese whispers have intervened and it's evolved and changed. I've heard people say that Zinedine Zidane said he was the best player he ever played alongside. No, they never actually played alongside each other. Zidane had actually just said he's one of the best number 10s in world football. But over the years, I've heard people say, Zidane said that Moravcik's the best player he's ever played with. And I was like, I don't think he did, because when I went to do my research for this, I went and looked at Zidane's club history and was expecting to see Saint Etienne, and it was like, oh no, he never actually played for Saint Etienne at any point. So, but yeah, Zidane has been on record. But yeah, Liam, that's still huge praise, regardless. You've got Zidane and Platini. So a minute ago I said Platini, one of France's best players, and you've got Zidane as well, who could easily be regarded as France's best ever player. Definitely the two best number 10s that have ever played for France. But huge praise right away, isn't it?
Without a doubt,
Aye. Now as well, the 1990 World Cup, Johnny, do you have any fond memories of that one? Because that one's a wee bit before my time. My one was 1994. I dived in that.
The 1990 World Cup. Oh, Christ, now you're asking, Phil, for this. Was that was what was the 1990? Was that
Italy?
Italy. Was that the one that Scotland played the first game against Argentina?
No, the first game was Argentina, but it was Cameroon, and Roger Miller scored against Cameroon. But Scotland had an infamous campaign, losing to Brazil, beating Sweden, and losing to Costa Rica.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, he turned out for Czechoslovakia at that World Cup. He was there, and I think the Czechs got to the quarterfinals for losing to Germany. But it was off the back of that appearance at that World Cup that he got his move to Saint Etienne.
So obviously the fact that I struggled to it, no, I don't have any what you call special memories of that World Cup. No, and certainly no recollection of seeing this wee guy playing for anybody. I think, oh, fucking hell, he looks a player. So no is the answer to that one, Phil, quite simply.
No, that's right. Because I remember years ago, like after he signed for Celtic, I remember I was in school at the time, and on some days, like, if it was like a sub teacher or something, they put like a video on or something like that if there wasn't anything in the work program. And I remember they had an Italian 90 VHS that sometimes they would stick on, and there'd be highlights coming up of like a Czechoslovakia game during it, and the commentary would say Moravcik. It's one of those moments where you sit forward and go, oh my God, Lubo Moravcik. So that was like, 8 years before that? So it was like 98, 99 that he signed for us. And I remember being in school and always seeing the footage of that, like the Italia 90 World Cup, and it was like, Moravcik played for Czechoslovakia. So I say it was, obviously he turned it for that, but then they split into Czech Republic and Slovakia, and then he played for the Slovakian side of it. But of course, we'll be getting on that very, very soon. But yeah, the time at Saint Etienne, so he racked up, let's see, he had 197 appearances and scored 31 times. But yeah, he was there till 1996. But midway through, and I didn't know this at the time, he was this close to getting a Champions League winners medal, because Marseille came a knocking for him. They came at St. Etienne's door and were like, that'll be a Lubomir Moravcik guy. Is he available? And from watching the videos on like YouTube and doing a bit of research, it turned out that Moravcik was very, very interested in going to Marseille. But I say it's a good few months before they won the Champions League in 1993. It was during the 92-93 season. So he was up for going, but it turns out, as the story goes, Liam, that the chairman of Saint Etienne recognised how much a hero he was to the Saint Etienne fans and basically blocked the transfer from going. But I don't know if you'd watched the Gift from God documentary where he talks about it. And he does seem to have a wee bit of regret, like he's like kind of wishes it had happened. But when you think about it, those sliding doors moment, had he made that move to Marseille, there's a good chance that the move to Celtic years later doesn't happen, because one of the big mysteries about Moravcik is, for such an amazing player, he never played for like a top team across the continent. And then if he go to Marseille, who would have became the Champions League winners in a few months' time, I would have put him right out of our radar, I reckon. Like, no chance years later are we going to pick him up for the price we did.
I think when you watch that film, Gift for God, you see the relationship he had with his father as well, and his dad was a professional football player as well. I think he played with United as well, right? And he was always saying it was like, for him, it was like, from coming from a communist country and all that, to be able to play football, and it's sort of, I think, what we're trying to do with Ange right now is like cultivate this sort of family unity within the club, so that he's, part of us as well, and so that you don't want him to leave. And I think maybe just his humility got the better of him there, and then in retrospect, you see it now, you see his career. He would have liked to have played in some bigger stages, because I don't think he ever won a medal till he came to us.
That's right.
No, no.
I
I think what that shows, actually, the fact that it was the chairman of St Etienne who blocked the move to Marseille. It shows you the difference now in the shift in power. If that had been now, if Lubo was playing now at St Etienne and Marseille came along, he'd have gone. He just said, I want to go. And if the chairman had said no, if he was of that sort of way of minded, he'd just said, well, I'm going. I'm not playing for you anymore. And player power to push that move through to Marseille. But he accepted the decision from the chairman. He stayed in 3 years at St Etienne. So it just shows you the swing in power from what the players had then to what they've got now.
Compared to now, I say some of the stories you're hearing about guys like Mbappe in particular, for me, he is the poster boy of many things that are wrong in football at the moment. A gifted player, but we are hearing some of the stories about the player power. And I think the other day for the France national team, he refused to take part in a photo shoot that they were doing, because obviously France have got together for the international games that are going on. He refused to take part because some sort of media issue, some sort of image rights issue. And it's just like, oh my God. And then there's a whole story about his new contract that he signed, where he gets a say now in like the manager at PSG, and a say in any players that they are going to sign. He has to basically give it the thumbs up if that's the level of player he wants to be playing alongside. And it's like, guys like that are the poster boy. And player power nowadays is just absurd. But you're totally right in what you're saying there, Johnny. But it's like, if it was modern day, and if Lubo was that way inclined in terms of his attitude, then if a chairman says, "Oh no, we're not selling you. You're a hero here," he would be like, "No, you just get his agent on him." I mean, the agent's a massive influence. But this is close to that time.
I think you've got to remember that time. I'm sure Marseille were probably the powerhouse in French football anyway at the time.
They were.
They were probably the equivalent to what PSG are now.
We had Jean-Pierre Papin, and I think Rudy Voller might have been playing for them at that time as well. But that was the one that went on to win the Champions League in 92-93. So Moravcik was that close. He was that close. Now, Liam, there was a wee story that you said to us just before we came on. I've just mentioned there, like guys like Zidane and Platini, who are obviously waxing lyrical over the years about Lubomir Moravcik. But there's another player as well, a bit closer to home for Lubo, that has basically came out and said that he was his footballing hero. If you wish to enlighten the viewers on that one, because I found this quite fascinating. A very full circle moment when you hear it.
Well, it's another number 10, right? And so it was the number 10 that replaced Zidane at Juventus. Was you got Pavel Nedved?
Yes.
I remember in the lead up to the games when we were playing Celtic Juventus, he was coming out and he was saying that he was so honoured to be playing on the pitch with Lubo, as that was one of his heroes growing up as well. And you see that, you see that with the timeline of what would have been either Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic at that point. He still would have been on his radar, So I thought that's a nice wee bit of like continuation of the number 10 and a wee bit of the Juventus tie. And there's 3 guys for Juventus that played in the engine room in the number 10 position that were all influenced by one of the same men.
That's mad. That it really is, because when Zidane left, Nedved the mover. Because this season that we're talking about, the 98-99 one, when Moravcik joins, Nedved is at Lazio, and he's about to score the winner in the last ever Cup Winners' Cup final. Nedved scores the winning goal at the end of the season in the Cup Winners' Cup. He gets a move to Juventus a couple of years later, because Zidane moves to Real. He replaces him. But because did Nedved play in the game at Celtic Park, the 4-3, or did he Russell said a couple of times, we talked about this, the Juve fielded a bit of a second string team that night. Did Nedved play? Might have played in the game in Turin. Might have played in that one, definitely, because he's it was 01-02 season, so that was the year that Real Madrid won it with a goal at Hamden. Zidane's definitely moved to Real at that point. But yeah, I've got a vision as Nedved being on the park at Celtic with that black strip on. You see that blonde mop of hair of his. I've definitely got a vision. Somebody will say in the chat as well. Also, Stevie Kenny came into the chat to say he was at Italia 90. I was at the World Cup, but I had tickets for a Czech game, but I went and got Blotto instead, celebrating my 21st that summer. Goodbye, Stevie Kenny. Also, I saw Stevie Kenny. He must have missed the very, very start of the show. No, Stevie, it's not a Partick Thistle shirt. It's a Valencia shirt. See, it's Valencia, not Partick Thistle. I'm going to keep on saying that. But anyway, I saw a comment earlier on when he said, Phil with a Partick Thistle shirt on the night. It's not Thistle, okay? But yeah, let's move on regardless. So yeah, so he's at St Etienne at this point in 1996. Now, along the way, he actually wins the Czechoslovak Football of the Year in 1992. But that was an award from his own FA rather than the French. He didn't win like any Player of the Year awards in France. And as we've already said, he didn't win any like medals, winners' medals, cups, or leagues or anything until he came to us. So it's been a bit bad. He was so close to say joining Marseille, but he sticks around at Saint Etienne until 96 when he transfers to another French team. He goes after Saint Etienne got relegated. He goes to SC Bastia, who are based in is it the island of Corsica?
I think it is.
Yeah. He went there, played there for 2 years, scored 8 goals in 33 games, and in the summer of 1998, Lubo made a move to Germany to join MSV Duisburg, where he only played 5 games before he became a blip on the radar of one Joseph Venglos. Now, how did all of that come about? Because see, this is in the days before transfer windows. This is in the days before FIFA put rules in where you're only allowed to play for like 3 clubs in a calendar year. So he's only just joined Duisburg in the summer of 1998, only played a handful of games, but he's about to move to us. But how on earth did all that come about? Now, this is quite interesting how this has all worked out. I didn't even plan this because obviously last week we talked about stopping the 10, 97-98 season, a big one for Celtic. And at the end of the show, we obviously talked about the disarray that the club suddenly descended into again because typical Celtic in the 1990s, you know, they don't usually, even nowadays at times, in recent years, we've seen through the 2000s, 2010s, there's been moments where, you know, we're in a position of strength and then we do something really stupid and either don't push forward or we shoot ourselves in the foot. And of course, at the end of the 97-98 season, after all the dismay between Jock Brown, Fergus McCann and Wim Jansen, win the league, first title in 10 years, a few days later, Wim Jansen leaves. And obviously, that sends the club another step. But going back to square one again, where we had to go and find a new manager. We spent most of the summer trying to find one. There was a World Cup on, which obviously caused a distraction. We had about 11 players, I think, that went to the World Cup. I think there was 8 or 9 that went with the Scotland team alone, and we had Mark Reaper and Morten Vikhorst went with the Denmark squad. So right away, they're away playing in that. They're not going to come back till later in the summer for pre-season. In the end, obviously, Jock Brown and Fergus McCann pull another rabbit out the hat, keeping it very, very quiet from the media. Because again, they didn't know who Wim Jansen was. They certainly didn't know who Joseph Venglos was when he walked in, as did many of the fans. So, Johnny, I'll come to you this because obviously me and Liam and Russell talked about this last week about our feelings. Putting yourself back in that moment in 98 when Joseph Venglos was unveiled across the city, obviously, Rangers have spent the best part of about 30 million quid after losing the league. They've went out very aggressively and got Kanchelskis, Van Bronckhorst, Newman, Amato, Rod Wallace, all these type of players. Celtic haven't signed anybody at all the entire summer. We've got in a manager, 62-year-old Joseph Venglos, who nobody'd heard of. I know he had quite a few impressive stuff on his CV, but this is long before the days of the internet. So you can kind of understand why fans were a wee bit annoyed on Flag Day when they booed Fergus McCann. I know with hindsight, when you hear that story, a lot of people go, can't believe they would boo Fergus McCann, but when you present it with a bit of context, you can kind of get it. What were your feelings initially, Johnny, when that happened? You know, a whole summer after winning the league and then having to go back to square one again, and yeah, the frustration. How were you feeling that at that point in time?
I think what you've got to do there, Phil, is you've got to take it back even to the start of the previous season, where I was convinced Rangers were going to do the 10. we appointed Wim Jansen, the everybody's favourite uncle, granddad, whatever, and we went into that season under Wim more in desperation, hope than real expectation, if I'm being honest. But we done it. We stopped to 10, and we were way up here.
Mm-hmm.
Couple of days later, we're crashing back down to here, and we're thinking,
yeah,
fucking hell, Celtic are doing it to us again. Then we spent the whole summer, as you've just said there, trying to find a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the World Cup was a distraction or not at the time, I don't know, because at the end of the day, I think when we appointed Dr. Joe, as you've said in the notes, it was who?
Doctor Who?
I don't think he was attached to anybody. It's not like we had to negotiate with anybody to get released from a contract. They must have either approached people who they couldn't get for whatever reason, and then at the end of the year, as desperation stakes set in, they ended up pulling this rabbit out of the hat in Dr. Joe, and we had to hope that he was going to do the same as the other unknown who we'd appointed the previous summer. Yeah. So I think again it was another. They'd taken us to this low, they'd taken us to this high, then they crashed us back even lower than we'd been before, because you're just thinking, what the, and as you've said, we didn't spend a penny, and Rangers went out and spent the best part of 30 million quid, which, when you think about it, me and Russell were talking about last night, is only 8 million quid less than what we spent last year, or in the last 12 months.
Yep.
And this is what, 24 years later?
Yep, so, indeed.
Devastated, and to be honest with you, for me personally, at the start of the season, didn't really hold out much hope for anything. As it turned out pretty much right. Then for what we won that year, which was the square root of fuck all.
Yes, it was. It was the best one. But I suppose if the internet was a juggernaut that it is nowadays, back then, because obviously again, you got to take into context, it's 1998 when this happened. We didn't have all that information at our fingertips, and I think if Wikipedia was around then, you could go on and go, well, Joseph Ingles, he's got quite an impressive CV, because I believe he even crossed paths with us in the early 90s as Sporting Lisbon manager in a UEFA Cup tie, which I believe George Cadet might have scored the winning goals against us. There's another full circle moment right there. George Cadet would end up playing for us as well. Somebody in the comments said, but I'm sure we did the early 90s episode when I mentioned the Sporting Lisbon game. We're going through the seasons. I'm sure somebody said in the comments Dr. Joe was their manager, but when I looked at his history and I saw Sporting was there, I was like, that probably is about the right time. But yeah, if that was a thing at the time, it might be, of course, that's all ifs, buts, and maybes. It wasn't. People could only go by what the newspapers essentially were telling them. And most people were like, unless you were a real football connoisseur back in the late 90s, you were honestly like, who? I say Doctor Who was the headline that came up on most of the papers. And
when was he the manager of Aston Villa? Because I've got no recollection of being at Aston Villa.
He was Villa manager. I will take that to VAR right now, as in Wikipedia, and I will tell you when he was, because I think it was late 80s maybe. I don't think it was a Premier League era, because the Premier League started in 92, 93. Yeah, he was Villa manager in 1990, 91, so just before the Premier League era. That's that weird sort of state part of English football before Sky Television, because a lot of people are like, modern day fans don't remember football before Sky. And there's this weird thing where who covered English Premier League football before Sky did? And it's like, yeah, there's like this era from like the mid-80s to the early 90s. Yeah, it was ITV covered them, but yeah, you didn't get the media coverage that's all around the Premier League now. But yeah, he was Aston Villa manager in the old First Division before it became the Premier League.
I can remember the likes of Ron Saunders being manager at Villa, and I can remember Brian Little and John Gregory. I'm not too sure of what era they were, but I just cannot place Joe Ingles at Aston Villa at all.
Seemingly it was 1990 to 1991, so he didn't last too long there. But yeah, just again looking at his managerial record, I mean, he began managing in 1966. He's managed the Australian national team in 1967, Slovan Bratislava, Sporting Lisbon. In fact, the Sporting game was way, way before the Cadet one, so that was a different game with Sporting in the 80s. Then we played them again in the 90s. You've got Villa, Fenerbahce, the Slovakian national team, the Czechoslovakian national team. In fact, Czechoslovakia up to 1990. So you've got to assume he was probably the manager at Italia 90 for the Czech national team. But he's got a hell of a CV there. But I say, when you're going back to put yourself back in 1998 for any of the younger viewers and try and see it from that light, where you're like, nobody knew all this. You could only go by what the newspapers were telling you, and as I say, most of the headlines were, who's this guy that Celtic have brought in? Rangers just brought in PSV's manager, Dick Advocaat, have given him about 30+ million quid. Okay, yes, in hindsight, that was a bad idea because it caught up with them eventually. But again, we didn't know that in 1998. We didn't know what was going to happen to them. So yeah, you can imagine that a lot of fans were kind of miffed that we hadn't bought a single player. And of course, I've mentioned this last week when we were talking, I was saying about Jock Brown. Now, the story goes with how we signed Lubomir Moravcik was in 2013, roughly, I listened to a podcast on the Celtic Underground with Harry Brady. We sat down with Jock Brown and talked about his time at Celtic. I found that really fascinating listen, but the Lubomir Moravcik one was a really fascinating story, because this is actually the last player that Jock Brown signed before his resignation. So as I said, the World Cup's happened. And the problem that you've got there is players are coming back late from pre-season. So Joseph Venglos comes in mid-July, but a few players still away because they played in the World Cup. So you've got 9 players were away with the Scotland team alone. I can't believe how many Celtic players were in that Scotland team at the World Cup. And it was pretty much the whole any Scottish player that Celtic team was pretty much at that World Cup. I say we've got 2 Danish players as well, Mark Rieper and Morten Vikhorst. So by the time Joseph Venglos had any real moment to sit down and assess the squad and what was needed, you were going into maybe early September, October time, when he could finally sit down with Jock and say, right, I've identified that these are the areas we need to improve in, these are what we need and so forth, right? And one of the things that he said to me, I'm going from this Jock Brown interview, I tried to find it, I was hoping it'd be uploaded somewhere on like YouTube or something, but it's not to be seen. It might be on the archives of iTunes somewhere, but one of the things that Venglos said when he sat down with him says, look, a great team, or a good team, has 1 world-class player. A great team has at least 3 world-class players. He says at the moment, this Celtic team has 1 world-class player, Henrik Larsson. So he's like, but I know a player that I think can be the second world-class player we need. So obviously Jock Brown's intrigued right away. He's like, okay, tell me more about this guy, right? And obviously he explains to me, he says, well, he's playing for the Slovakian national team against Portugal in an upcoming European Championship qualifier. So they travel over to Bratislava to watch Slovakia play against Portugal. And the thing is, he's briefed in advance that, his age, obviously, it's not like this crept up on him that he found out the age, but he still went to see him anyway. So Joseph Venglos and Jock Brown both travel, and he's madly impressed with him watching him. He's taken every corner, every free kick. His delivery is phenomenal with both feet. If the corner's on the left side, he goes over there and takes it. If it's on the right side, goes on and takes it, no problem. So Jock Brown's absolutely mesmerised by this guy. Of course, Slovakia actually lose the game 3-0 in the end. They actually do get a trounce off of Portugal, but he still was like, this guy does look really, really good. So after the game, they meet with him in the players' lounge and have a sit down and talks to him. And obviously, Joseph Venglos has to interpret for him because Lubo couldn't speak any English at all. So it had to be like through Joseph Venglos. And eventually got to the question, if Jock Brown put it to him, would you be interested in playing for Celtic? And amazingly, Moravcik was like, no interest at all. Maybe it's just because he'd moved to another team just a few months before, maybe didn't want to relocate, or at his age at that point, moving to like a team in Scotland or just the UK in general might have just been a bit too much. But he then goes on to say, but for Joseph Venglos, I will play anywhere. To which Jock Brown was like, well, that's a good thing because he's actually the Celtic manager. And that's how the story goes. I was like, that's actually quite amazing. But had you ever heard that one yourself, Liam? Oh, you muted yourself. Maybe the police cars must be going by again.
I'm back on. Aye, they were. I remember that. I thought he was when we first signed him. And I don't know. Do you remember the gear he was wearing when he showed up at Celtic Park? It has to be up there with one of the worst ever reveals ever. He was wearing a black leather jacket but it was a weird style because it looked like half of it was knitted. And so there was like this black knitted collar, black sleeves, and it was just like, it was the most cardboardy looking Barras type thing. And that's the thing, oh, he's going to love the Barras, you know, when I see him. It looked like it was brilliant, you know.
It was a great stroke of luck though, wasn't it, Johnny? That he's like, oh, but for Joseph Venglos, I will play anywhere. Well, that's good then, because you know this guy's a Celtic manager, and that's how it came about. Because originally he didn't actually have any interest in moving to us, but he'll play anywhere for Joseph Venglos. And going by that, the Gift from God DVD, I keep saying DVD, it was probably a VHS at the time. Watching that, he seems very like he owes a lot to Joseph Venglos. Like he was just like he was so enamored by the guy, but. Yeah, it was a stroke of luck that all came together. The stars just aligned for us in that one, didn't it, Johnny?
I think does he not say on that Gift of God video that when he left Bastia, he was actually contemplating retirement. It was either retirement or move to Duisburg.
He does say that. Yeah, he was coming up to 33 years old, and he was. Maybe he was just a bit sort of.
Pissed off.
I don't know, disillusioned with his career because he's come to 33, he's not won any major honours. He had a chance to a team that ended up winning the Champions League. He was that close to signing for them. Didn't happen. And it's like, you know, what options have I got here? So I did cross his mind by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I thought, yeah.
I think
I'm just reading Monty's comment there. I think there was quite a few guys would have been exactly the fucking same as that Monty. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely the benefit of hindsight, and obviously we'll get on to the infamous Hugh Keevins quote, which is coming up very, very soon. But again, I think I heard Mark talk about this the other week on the show where that was brought up briefly. And again, it's like, if anyone genuinely in 1998 went, oh, we signed a player here before even seeing him, or had genuinely claimed to have heard it, he'd have to be a real football connoisseur. Waiting for the days of the internet. Then most people wouldn't believe you, honestly, if you were saying, I always knew Moravcik would be a player. I'd been following his career very closely in France. Had you, though? Had you really? So I don't think anybody really knew that one. But yeah, as it turns out, he's now said that he's happy to move. So yeah, we ended up doing a deal with MSV Duisburg and got him for a whopping £300,000. Now, obviously, everyone talks about the Henrik Larsson deal, $650,000. I suppose over the time, everyone's always going to say that Larsson was obviously the best value for money with the amount of goals and the time that we got out of him. But this one's got to be up there, isn't it, Liam? 300,000 for this guy. It was quite a steal when you think about it.
And I think they found a way to slag us over that because that was the headline. For an extra 200,000, who could we have got? A guy we could have been talking about on a different podcast, but no, it wasn't him.
All right. John Spencer.
500,000. Guys like Keevins and all that were saying that we should have went after John Spencer. That would have been better value for our money. So.
Aye, because I'll find the quote just now from Mr. Keevins, and we'll go because see, when I was reading that one, I forgot about the whole John Spencer bit because this is the Motherwell team that the chairman John Boyle just came in. I believe he owned I want to say Barhead Travel, basically one of the major travel agents in Scotland, and he took over Motherwell, and that's when they had Pat Nevin and. They brought in Keith Lasley for his first spell, and Jed Brannan, John Spencer, Billy Davis, who would eventually become the manager. But yeah, they were just spending crazy money hand over fist. And I think a year later they were administration. So that works really well for Motherwell. But yeah, they end up with Spencer. Yeah, so Hugh Keevins' quote, word for word, is I don't know what I find more laughable. The fact that Celtic cannot find 500,000 from their biscuit tin to sign a proven talent like John Spencer, or the fact they spent 300,000 on one of Dr. Joe's old pals, the unknown Lubomir Moravcik. Now, again, with the benefit of hindsight, you know, was Hugh Keevins meant to know? We don't have the benefit of that. We can't go on YouTube and just watch a 10-minute highlight reel and go, oh, he's a right player. But at the same time, Hugh Keevins, as a journalist, he would have had contact, surely. He could have done a wee bit of due diligence and picked up the phone and been like, you know, somebody he knows that's maybe an expert on football on the continent and says, what do you know about this guy? Evidently, he didn't at all because, yeah, I mean, that headline is like, imagine if we'd signed John Spencer. John Spencer, 500,000? Nah, man, not at all. But that's how the quote goes. But yeah, obviously, Lubo, he jets in and he arrives on the 27th of October. But in the time that he's because I say we've obviously started season, this is before the days of transfer windows, right? So you can sign players at any point during the season. So we're already a good chunk into the season, and it's no started very, very well for us. We've already, at this point in the season, I have to say the dismay of the first day of the season, right, where the fans have booed Fergus McCann and Jock Brown on the first day for all the turmoil that we saw in the summer. We've already crashed out the Champions League. Our first crack at getting to the Champions League, and we've been knocked out by Dynamo Zagreb, or Croatia Zagreb as they were known at that point. For a few years, they went under the name of Croatia Zagreb, and then changed back to Dynamo Zagreb. Mark Viduka was playing for them that night. Another one that would cross our paths in the very, very near future. So we've dropped out of that. We dropped into the UEFA Cup. We got through the first round against a Portuguese team, Vitória Guimarães, but then we got knocked out by FC Zurich from Switzerland in the second round. And as for in the league, after 11 league games, our record reads 3 wins, 5 draws, and 3 losses. And even days after Lubo officially signed for the club, we actually lost to Kilmarnock at Rugby Park. So he's coming into a team that's pretty broken at this point already. We're only 11 games into the season, and already things are looking quite ominous, weren't they, Johnny? It was not the start that I think Joseph Venglos would have been wanting at this stage.
Yeah, a bit of an understatement there, mate. But,
Yep.
but yeah, no, it wasn't. And I think a lot of us have pretty much already resigned ourselves to the inevitable, if you like. But the thing was, I mean, we didn't have a bad squad. I mean, It wasn't, we had some, we had Lambert there, we had Burley there, Reaper was there, I think, wasn't he? But
Reaper, yep.
But I seem to remember, and I might be wrong, but did Reaper not get a serious knee injury, which basically finished his career right about the time when he was with us? I'm not saying it was then.
No, it was during this season. He definitely started to phase out because of an injury, and then he doesn't play that much under John Barnes. And then I think it's under O'Neill. He's still at Celtic for the whole year of Martin O'Neill's first season, but retires at the end of the season because he was just crocked the entire year.
I'm sure it was his knee, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think it was,
we had
his back.
We had Morton Vico. He was one of these players where he could look really good in classic, or he could look like he'd never seen a football in his life. But he wasn't a bad player. So we had a half decent squad. But when you're going, like you said, I think it was Dr. Joe had to get in there. Came in late anyway as a manager. He had to sort of look at the squad, decide what he was going to do, where he was going to play people, where the positions were, method of playing, and we just didn't have the time. And we got off to a bad start. But again, it's a long time ago now, but I'm trying to remember it. But I'm sure we did actually improve a bit, but never enough to get anywhere near back in the hunt for things, a serious hunt for things.
Yeah, the things that always stand out to me, I remember me and Russell had this chat ago because he recently bought the away kit from that season. I think he got it off of like eBay. So it's black with really thin sort of neon green stripes hoops going across that way. And he said to me, because that's the kit that Henrik Larsson broke his leg in. That's the one, right? But he said to me, who's the first player you think of when you see that kit? And amazingly, both of us had the same answer, and it was for the same bad reason. It was Reggie Blinker. Because see, in the second game of the season, Reggie Blinker scores a horrendous own goal up at Aberdeen. We lose 3-2. As a cross comes in and he tries to cushion a header back to Jonathan Gould and puts a bit too much on it. Gould's came off his line and it just loops over him into the net, and we end up losing 3-2. So that summed up. Only 2 games into the season, we're having a disaster like that. And then a few weeks later, obviously, remember the season 4, we won the League Cup. Our hold on the League Cup was already gone after the first quarter of the season because we get beat by Airdrie 1-0 in the League Cup. A lower league team knocked us out, and a 1-0 loss. And it's like, this is not going to say after 11 games with 3 wins, 5 draws, 3 losses. There was one spell in particular, I think it's in September, where we win 1 game and draw 3, albeit one of the draws was actually a 0-0 with Rangers at Ibrox, where, if I remember right, we were inches away from winning that. Henrik Larsson has an incredible diving header. He throws himself at it, and only Henrik Larsson can do it this way. Only he can do this. And Lionel Charbonnier, who was Rangers goalkeeper just before they signed Stefan Klos, literally gets like a fingertip on it to put it onto the crossbar. It's like, we were that close to beating them in that one. But yeah, we went on a really bad run. dropping points to teams like Dundee, Killie, Rangers, Hearts, Dunfermline, say Aberdeen, second game of the season. A horrendous own goal for Reggie Blinker. So I always, whenever I see that black kit with the neon green hoops, I just think of that horrible Reggie Blinker. And the other memory, of course, is Henrik Larsson's broken leg. So there isn't many good memories attached to that away kit. You find maybe the grey away kit from this season will be something similar after the first outing it got last week.
I would imagine so, yeah. You might be right on that one. It's first and last appearance, maybe.
Hope so.
Hopefully, aye. Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. But yeah, Liam, what was your thoughts then when obviously Lubo comes in? See, the headlines were quite, who's this guy? So much like the Joseph Engels one. Because again, I'd only been watching like football at this stage of my life since 1994. So it's 94 years I've been watching it. And even in the short time I've been watching, I'm already conditioned to accept that Czechoslovakia broke up. Czech Republic is all the good players from that country. Slovakia is all the bad ones. Because 2 years before the Czech Republic got to the European Championship final, you had Patrick Berger, who was one of Liverpool's top players in the Premier League. Karel Poborský was playing at Man U, then got a big move to Lazio as well. And as I say, Pavel Nedved is about to basically take the world by storm. He's at Lazio. He's about to score the win on the Cup Winners' Cup final this season. So Czech players, in my mind, are like where it's at if you're going to buy players from that region. So when I saw a 33-year-old Slovakian, £300,000 coming in, I wasn't exactly won over.
No, I mean, I think the player we signed just before him was Vidar Rusev. And that was a big, and signing that got anybody's imagination going or that. And going back to Reggie Blinker as well. I mean, I remember the crowd went sour on him because when we played that game in Zagreb, he was talked about like completely shirked out a tackle. That was I think it was a 60-40 in his chance, but one of the big, Serbian bears coming up, and he just, jumped out the way pretty well. And so the whole mood about Celtic at that point with Lubo coming in, and again, he didn't hit the ground running. He wasn't amazing when the first time he stepped on, where you went, wow, that guy's exceptional. And when he came in, the team was just in a spiral, and it looked like, oh, Christ, this is going to be Celtic. It's going to be another one of the years, And so, yeah, I wasn't excited about Lubo. I was excited about Celtic at the time, So you just want to see where it would go and what else would come. It was just all very, very new,
Aye, was this? I'm just looking at Pat was saying Czechoslovakia team of the 70s, which won European Championship, was dominated by Slovak players. Actually, that's the Panenka. That's the Panenka penalty. That's the chip down the middle. It was Antoine Panenka, I believe his name was, something along those lines. That's where it comes from. The old chip.
I don't know his first name, but it definitely was Panenka.
I think it was Antoine or something like that. But yes, that's where it came from. But I was all Slovak players. But yeah, see, in my mind, I was already conditioned to think, well, Czech Republic are the good side. Like what came out of that split. Slovakia is basically the dregs. There's nothing good. But look at the recent years. Slovakia have beaten more World Cups in my lifetime than Scotland have in European Championships. Like honestly, they became a decent outfit in recent years. But yeah, we'll So we've covered basically sort of setting the scene for Lubo arriving at Celtic. So what we'll do is we'll come up to the 50-minute mark just now, is I'll do the musical interlude just now, and then when we get into it, we'll start concentrating on his first season at the club. We'll go through, because he was there for four seasons, 98 through to 2002. Yeah. So that's what we'll do. That's our 4 segments it's broken up into. So yeah, we'll concentrate on the 98-99 season. Of course, one of the things we'll be talking about right away is a match which has become known as simply the humping. So if you didn't tell you what, but yeah, we'll be talking about that quite early on, because it's what a way to start essentially your career. No start as you mean to continue. But yeah, we'll be diving right into that one when we come back in a couple of minutes, folks. So
controversy in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.
And we are back, although Liam's just taking the seat just now. Don't worry, Liam. It's cool, man. But yeah, we'll get into it now. So Lubomir Moravcik is now officially arrived in Glasgow. He is now a Celtic player. And as I say, he's coming into a team that's in a wee bit of disarray right now. We've not had the best first quarters of the season, to put it lightly. But yeah, he arrives officially on the 27th of October 1998. That makes him Celtic's second signing season after the aforementioned Vidar Risev. And of course, this turns out to be General Manager Jock Brown's final ever signing that he oversaw, because on the 7th of November, he resigns his position as General Manager. Now, when Lubo, of course, jetted in, just to get a bit of the old pop culture stuff in there, the big number one act in the charts, Billy Piper was number one in the chart with the song Girlfriend. If you wanted to go to the cinema the day that Lubo signed, The Truman Show was the big film at the box office. The number one album at the time was Quenched by the Beautiful South. So that's to give you an idea of where we were in terms of music and film in October of 1998. And the big movers, of course, because I always like to talk about who transferred where, even though, yes, last week Russell did call into a question. He wanted to take it to VAR that the website I use, Transfer Market, might be a bit dubious with some of its prices. I don't know where they got 9 million for Graham Lasso from. Even I doubted it, but I don't have time to research all that stuff. I just take their word for it. But anyway, the top 5 big transfers in the world in the summer, well, even though it's October he transferred, but the summer of 1998, the big ones were Juan Sebastian Veron went from Sampdoria to Parma for 15.75 million. Dwight York, Aston Villa to Man United, 17.3 million. Nicola Ventola went from Bari to Inter Milan for 18.9 million. Christian Vieri, who is an absolute journeyman when I looked up his career on Wikipedia, he barely spent 2 seasons at any clubs. But yeah, he leaves Atletico Madrid after a season, goes to Lazio for 25.5 million. And the big summer transfer in 1998 is Denilson from Sao Paulo to Real Betis for 28.35 million. So yeah, that's big one. But I say in terms of transfers, say the big obviously we've just brought in Lubo, 300,000, better value than any of them, I'll tell you. Well, maybe not. But yeah, obviously Hugh Keevins, he's had his say on it. He was too impressed. So many Celtic fans were kind of wondering what we're going to get here. Now, contrary to popular belief, because as you find with Celtic and just football in general, you know, sometimes some stories can gain kind of grow arms and legs and a wee bit of, you know, bit of Chinese whispers again, because this is one of these ones that I think people just say it this way because it sounds a bit more romantic. He didn't actually make his debut against Rangers. A lot of people say, oh, you know, what a debut, you know, scoring 2 in his first game against Rangers. He didn't. He actually played 2 games before he played against Rangers. The first one was actually a 6-1 victory over Dundee at Celtic Park, where he gave an idea to the Celtic fans, you know, the class that he had, although we didn't see it in full till the Rangers game when we saw what he could do. But he had a few good touches that day, you know, and a lot of fans really go, oh, this guy might, you know, have something in him. You know, he looks so too bad. And from the clips that I watched on YouTube, again, you see some of like the passes he's pulling off, some of the touches, shots from outside the area, and you're like, not too bad. I'm kind of quietly impressed with this one. But yeah, the next game he plays, though, we actually got beat because an astounding fact, you know, you've got some teams are a bogey team for certain ones. This season in particular, we played St Johnstone 4 times and lost 3 times to them. And this was one of them. We get beat by St Johnstone up at McDermott Park, and Moravcik played in that one. So yeah, so even before he's played this game against Rangers, which I say some fans have got it sort of mixed up that this was his debut against Rangers. No, he played against Dundee in a 6-1 victory, and then a game where we lost up at McDermott Park. But then, of course, it comes along, guys, the humping, as I said, it's now affectionately known as on Celtic Wiki when you go and read about it. So I'll come to you, Liam. You might know this, right? Maybe Johnny, you know this. And maybe somebody in the chat can enlighten me. At a time when Sky were covering every Celtic Rangers game, why was this at 3 o'clock on a Saturday? Does anybody know? Because as far as I know, this is the last ever Celtic Rangers game at 3 o'clock on a Saturday in a league game, not on the telly. I had to listen on the radio at the time. Do you have any idea, Liam, as to why that happened?
I don't know. I remember there being talk about like fan behaviour, stuff like that, or it was a way just to sort of police fans so that something to do with drinking and that. You know, I was in Canada at the time, but I remember that being some of the stories, you know, we were reading and that. But it's amazing is that the last one we've ever played at 3 on a Saturday?
Yes, it is indeed. Yep, every game after that has been Sky have covered it, but even in the years running up to that, they were always on Sky. During the Sky television boom of the early 90s, when they covered Scottish football and were a better deal than what they do now, yeah, they would even send like Martin Tyler and Andy Gray up, the A-team of their commentary teams, to do the Celtic and Rangers games. But yeah, this one's an oddity. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. What about you, Johnny? Do you have any stories from back then that maybe why this was played? Or just
no, absolutely. To be honest, with you, absolutely no idea. No idea whatsoever. Like you said, just to seem a strange one, because I think by that time we had got used to the games being on the telly one way or another, whether it was Sky or whether it was, terrestrial television, they were generally on.
Yep.
But I wouldn't be able to give not even a guess as to why.
Yeah. Same. It's not like one of these ones where I'm going to hit you with the answer because I found out. I genuinely don't know. So I've just wondered if somebody does. But Sean Barlow, he sums it up perfectly. This is a time capsule of 1998. My first memory of this game was having to check the scores on teletext. God, teletext and CFAX, eh? My God. That does take me back. But yeah, I listened to it on the radio. I can remember very vividly listening. And of course, on the radio, it always sounds a lot more dramatic. So you have to try and envision it in your head. But I just couldn't believe it when the score was just like 1-0 Celtic, then 2-0. 3-0. Then I think Rangers get it back to 3-1, and then it was 4-1, 5-1. It was just like, I can't actually believe that's happened, because the season before we did get one victory over them in the league, but for the most part over the other league games, they beat us in the cup as well, but 5-1 out of nowhere. But
I can tell you somebody else who couldn't believe that result either that day, and that was Stuart McCall. He used to play for Rangers. He was, by that time, he was at Bradford.
With Bradford, yep.
And I remember reading him talking about it. He says he was in the dressing room after the game, and somebody came in and said, "What was the score of the Celtic Rangers game?" He said 5-1. He went, "Fucking hell!" He said, "I thought we'd win, but I didn't think we'd win 5-1." He went, "No, it was Celtic that won 5-1."
Wow.
So it got Stuart McCall out by surprise as well, like by all accounts.
Oh. I'd say it took even most Celtic fans, I think, by surprise, because a win over Rangers wasn't that rare in the 90s, despite how bad they were. But 5-1 out of nowhere, I was like, Jesus Christ! I mean, we didn't even concede 5 goals to them during the 90s. I think the last time was in '89. That's the one when Ray Wilkins scores an absolute raspberry of volley. They beat us 5-1. Was it Ian Andrews made his debut for the club? That one. Yeah, but that was the last time that either side of the Glasgow divide had scored 5 goals in the fixture. But that was 10 years before, so it's a rarity to see it. But we go on and win this game forward. So obviously the first goal is ball comes across the edge of the 18-yard line. Henrik Larsson dummies it really well. Moravcik runs onto it and just places it in the bottom corner, because Anthony Niemi was in goal for Rangers as well in this game. Which is one of the things, because they signed Charbonnier, but Niemi started in this game. We, of course, had Tony Warner in goal at the other end, which is another forgotten fact, because Jonathan Gould was crocked with an injury. Stuart Kerr was our only other goalkeeper option, so we drafted in Tony Warner on a sort of emergency loan from Liverpool, and that's one of the very few games he actually played for us. But yeah, Moravcik opens the scoring. Now, Liam, this is something that's been spoken about for years and years, and I guess it just shows you how, like, I kind of like this in a way, because he's not too emotionally involved in the fixture, but the look on Moravcik's face for his first goal and obviously his second goal, he doesn't like go mad celebrating. I don't think he realises the gravity of what he's done at that point, because he's only in the door a few weeks. But I think that kind of helps a wee bit, because the pressure obviously wouldn't have got to him, because he doesn't realise the magnitude of the game he's playing in, because he just kind of shrugs off the goal like, I do that, no problem. That's what I'm all about. There's a smile on his face, just like, what is it? What are you so excited about?
I think it was probably more that he didn't really have any respect for Rangers or anything at that point either. It's like, this mob, they didn't seem, he played against a lot better. And, I think, he just was like, all right, this is easy enough. I remember that morning going to the game. I watched that game in Montreal. That was one of the ones where you're out in a city you don't know, 7 a.m, trying to find a cab to get to some club you've never heard of, or taxi drivers never heard of, with the local Celtic club and that. And I remember I had no idea who Tony Warner was until we got to the match. I mean, that was one of the big conversations. Nobody was talking about Lubo. That the big conversation is, are we going to be all right with
Tony Warner?
I don't think it was even in the news the day before that we were changing our goalkeeper, and he just showed up at the blue. he played well, you know.
I'll quickly tell you a wee sidetrack story, a wee Tony Warner story that I've always got a giggle out of. Neil Ruddock, Big Razor Ruddock, he was on Soccer AM years ago when Soccer AM was still good, and he talked about Tony Warner at Liverpool, and basically Ruddock, Fowler, McAteer, all that crew, they used to call him Bonus. That was his nickname, because all he ever did was turn up and pick up a win bonus. He would never ever play for Liverpool, ever. Like, I don't think he's got any actual appearances in any league games, maybe like the occasional League Cup game. But yeah, they used to call him Bonus at training and stuff like that because that's all he did, just turned up and picked up a win bonus. So even when he came to us on that loan, he barely played a game for Liverpool. Because I remember at the time when we signed him, like at that point in time, I'm just consuming all football stuff, sticker books and all that, And Tony Warner, I knew was Liverpool's backup goalie that never, ever played. So even when we signed him, it was like, oh, it's a bit dodgy. But yeah, he's got that on his CV. He's got that 5-1 win. But Johnny, what about you? What's your memories of this game then? Watching that one where I say Moravcik just kind of shrugging it off when he scores his 2 goals, like. Yeah,
well, my memories of the game are a bit like you. I mean, I was listening on the radio, so obviously then watching the highlights later on at night, and yeah, like I said, when he scored, it was almost like he didn't really realise the impact or the magnitude of it. But when you watch goals he scored later on in his time at Celtic, he knew the impact when he was scoring them because he celebrated them ones all right. But I think it was just, and it was almost like a case of, well, like you just said there, it's no big deal. Like the ball came to me and I just hit it. Where I meant it to go. Job done.
It's a tidy finish for us. I say Larson dummies it really well, and he just picks his spot, puts it around the bottom corner, no problem for Naemi. Second goal was a header where he was just completely unmarked in the middle, just the cross comes over, and nobody's picked him up. Something nods it in. And then I say Larson gets 2. There's one where he's in one-on-one with Naemi and just sort of gently dings it past him. But the other one, of course, is Burchell scoring the 5th goal. And Burchell's celebration, he runs away like he actually does that as a celebration because it's like doesn't know what to do. And again, he's probably with Burchell growing up as a Celtic fan, even he was probably stunned. Like, well, winning 5-1, what the hell? And this is at a point where had we lost that game, we would have been 13 points behind in the league, way off it. We brought it back to 7 by winning that game, but in spectacular fashion. And also this was Johan Mjällby's debut. What a game to come into. Johan Mjällby had signed and that was his first game, so it was they're starting to get the pieces coming together. I mean, you actually look at Weghorst where every manager, it feel like as bad as some managers can be over the years, they always have at least one good signing. And Weghorst, despite his year in charge being associated with didn't win anything anyway, he brought in quite a few players that have had a lasting impact in the club. Obviously, Moravcik and Johan Mjällby. We're going to have an amazing career with the club. As even John Barnes managed to sign Stilian Petrov, so there's his one success, I suppose you could say. But yeah, Mjällby came in that one, and he was what a game to come into. But he was an absolute warrior, so it's probably nothing for him in terms of the intense atmosphere. But of course, the game's also remembered for it full time. I believe this is the one where on the PA they played The Sweetest Thing by U2, which was like a huge hit at the time. But I'm sure that's the one at the end. They're boiling that over the PA system. But yeah, it's still strange though, a 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday. It was still a weird one, but I'm sure there's an answer out there somewhere as to why it was done. But it might be what you said, Lee. Maybe something to do with just policing fans a bit better. But yeah, it's one of those. It's the last ever time Celtic Rangers games kicked off at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. But yeah, Lubo gets his first 2 goals that day. And obviously, he's now basically announced himself to the Celtic faithful. Now we know what we've got on our hands. And yeah, he would kick on from there and would be would have quite a few good moments. One in particular would be we went over to Motherwell for Park and beat them 7-1 in a game as well, where he scored an absolutely fantastic free kick, which would become a trademark of his when you actually look at his highlight reel of goals. There's a lot of free kicks in there. Absolute set piece specialist. And again, it's that whole left foot, right foot, didn't matter what side it was on. He would go over at whatever one and just deliver it brilliantly or have a pop at goal. Wasn't an issue for him. But Liam, have you ever seen a player that is more skillful or more two-footed than Lubomir Moravcik at Celtic?
No, you're watching the some of the goals that he scored. I was watching the other night on the video collection, and it's unbelievable. He had like a Cruyff style turn that he used to do. And when I'm watching the video, it would say he would look at an opportunity, and if he couldn't do it with his right, then he'd just completely pivot to get onto his left, and he could crack it with either one. He wasn't a particularly powerful player, but I think his football intelligence just, everywhere, and you could see that in how he played, how he found openings, and he could hit with both feet, but it was like the same way Modric hits the ball with the outside of his foot.
Yeah.
A lot of Lubo with that as well, and especially in some of his crossings where he's running down the left side and he's hitting it with his right foot, but he's curling it as an in-swinger.
Aye.
You say he wasn't a very powerful player, Liam, but I'll tell you something. It must have all been in his technique and his timing, because he could hit a ball. I mean, he hits it. Christ, it stayed hit. I mean, he could. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of power in a lot of his shots, and I think that's what got a lot of his goals, because he was that quick, and like you said, Liam, with that turn he could do, and then he could just shoot when nobody expected him to shoot.
Right.
And the shot would be there. I was watching one of the goals. I think it was against Hearts, and I think it's Archie McPherson that's doing the commentary. He says, "Why did the goalkeeper even move?" Well, because he didn't expect him to hit the fucking ball when he did. He didn't expect him to hit it with that power either. Because he had a bit of a rocket shot on him when he wanted it.
Aye, he did.
And he could leap high as well. I mean, he could get up the ball guy. He could get up a decent height.
Aye, there was a few headers along the way in those goal montages. Just quickly to say as well, Sean Barlow, yes, Dr. Joe did sign Mark Viduka. He came shortly after this game. But interesting story, Sean, if you don't know it, Mark Viduka signed for us and then went AWOL for about 2.5-3 months. Apparently, he wasn't mentally prepared to play for Celtic. And when he signed for us, he was Marco Viduka. And when he came back, he was Mark Viduka. I don't know. I remember that being a thing. Like, he wanted to be known as Mark Viduka rather than Marco. And yeah, he wasn't mentally ready to play for us. But again, that's when I do the 98-99 season in more depth, when I go to cover it, that'll definitely be something that we've spoken about. Because Viduka, great player when he wanted to be, had a great partnership up front with Larson. But yeah, it's not a good thing when you sign for a new club and then right away you're like, I need to basically go and find myself because I'm not mentally prepared to play for the club, and disappears for 3 months or something. It's like,
did Fergus not try to dock his wages over that?
I wouldn't be surprised if Fergus tried that. I mean, come on, you've got to imagine.
I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I'm pretty sure he did actually. I don't know whether he done it or not, but something just tells me that there was discussions about he was going to dock his wages if he didn't come back, because he not only did not play for us, he, like I said, he actually went back to Australia, didn't he?
He did, yeah, aye, he did. It was a really weird one. I say when we go to do that season, I'll be looking forward to reading up on that one and refreshing my head. But I can always remember the whole when he signed for us, he was Marco Viduka, and when he came back, one of his things now was I want to be known as Mark Viduka. It was like that time when Andy Cole wanted to be known as Andrew Cole from now on, and it was like, okay. Interesting, is that in his contract or something like that? Is that like a stipulation he's put in his contract? It's a strange one. But yeah, Viduka's an interesting story in himself. But Johnny, I like that you mentioned about the shot that Lubo the power he could generate. Because do you guys remember the contribution he made in the next Celtic Rangers game he played at Ibrox in the New Year game? Because he played a pivotal role in us getting a point that night. We drew 2-2. Alan Stubbs got our first goal of the night, and it was actually a great finish for Stubbsy, given he was a centre-back, just sort of curved it into the back post. But the second goal comes from Moravcik. He's got, I believe, Amoruso sort of like marking him, like touch tight, like right up at his back, and he's got his back to goal. And he quickly spins him, and as he turns, he hits the ball, and it goes like an absolute fucking rocket, hits off the crossbar, and comes back to Henrik Larsson, who heads it, but Larsson doesn't even make a clean connection with it. It's not like a direct header right back into the net. He sort of heads it up the way and it loops. It's one of these ones where everything goes in slow motion for like a few seconds. You're like, is it going to go in? And it just drops in. Shabonia couldn't stop it from hitting the back of the net. But yeah, that just showed like the power he could generate. Again, just he's back to goal. I think it's Amoruso's trying to close him down and he just turns him. And in that one motion, just gets a shot away, and it's an absolute, as I like to say, a thunder bastard of a shot. Absolute screamer.
There's another one that he done against Aberdeen when you watch the video clips, and Jim Leighton looks like it's a real howler, and I suppose in many ways it was, but it shows the power that was in the shot because it actually hit Leighton on the chest. Leighton's got his hands up like this.
Yeah.
It goes through his hands basically, hits him on the chest, hits Leighton's hands, and then goes over Leighton's head and into the net. And that's all down to the actual power of the shot that created that ricochet. Like, the amount of ricochet that he created, it was just mad. Like I said, he could generate a hell of a power.
He had it all in his game. But yeah, after the initial 5-1 game against Rangers, he would grab a brace against Dunfermline in a 5-0 doing. So he was pivotal in the 2-2 draw at Ibrox at the New Year. So his shot rebounds off the crossbar and Larson bundles it in. And I say one of his standout performances and the team's standout performance. Probably that season, they go to Fir Park and absolutely smash Motherwell 7-1. Funny enough, Stevie Woods was in goal, who's nowadays our goalkeeper coach. Another full circle moment there. But Celtic actually went on an unbeaten run, going all the way back to the 6th of December 1998. But once again, St Johnstone came along and derailed it. Moravcik, unfortunately, got injured in that Motherwell game with a hamstring injury, put him out for a couple of months. But yeah, we kind of faltered against St Johnstone in early April of 1999, losing 1-0 again to them, which then set it up with the worst case scenario that could possibly happen. Did happen where our next game was against Rangers at Celtic Park, where if they beat us, they would have been the champions. It did go down the way it did. A lot of bad blood around it, and literally there was blood around it because Hugh Dallas was wearing the crimson mask at the end of not at the end of the game, during the game. It's one that I'll definitely talk about in more detail when we do the 98-99 one. The shame game, as it's been coming to known, the perfect storm, really, of everything that could go wrong, did go wrong that night. And we ended up losing 3-0, ended up losing the league. Say, Lubo's came in, he's shown us what he's all about, but he's not had the perfect start in terms of, success. His Rangers ended up going on and winning the treble that season. Say, Lubo missed most of the run-in. Could he have made a difference? Possibly. I mean, you look at the skill that he had, but yeah, that pesky St Johnstone again coming along the route. I think beat us 3 times that season was a little bit. But I say early signs were from that first season that we had him. You could tell that this guy's a player, and with the right man, they can really get the best out of him. And you'd think Joseph Venglos, but obviously Venglos moved on. You think, okay, if we get the right man in, this guy could be a real asset for us. But sadly, the next guy that came in, he wasn't the answer, because 99-2000 season, say Venglos, he's moved into, I think he became a scout for the club, officially. He didn't get sacked, he didn't resign. I think he became some sort of technical analyst something for the club. I remember on Champ Manager, he was a scout, because on Champ Manager he was a scout for something.
Specifically European scouting European players, was it? Yeah.
That was it, it was.
Was it not him that sent us Petrov?
It might very well have been. I say this is the season.
He was
talking about Petrov. Right. There you go then. He knows. He definitely. So maybe Barnes didn't quite get the credit. Although Barnes would have been the manager that signed him. But I can believe that Venglos is maybe the one that put us on to Petrov. It definitely sounds feasible. But yeah, he moves upstairs basically into a scouting role. And Celtic go and appoint as it was seen at the time, the dream team. Kenny Dalglish came in the new general manager position, or the director of football. It was now renamed. This is where, because when I talked about it in the 97-98 season, we did nowadays we know it as a director of football, but originally Fergus McCann started the role as a general manager, which Jock Brown had. So Kenny Dalglish was director of football, and the head coach of the club is going to be his former Liverpool teammate John Barnes, who at this point in time hasn't had any managerial experience. He's literally just retired a year before, and he's going right into a manager's role. Yeah, and it's going to be at Celtic. It's quite a big ask to cut your teeth there. But as it turns out, things started not too bad under John Barnes, which is one of the things that gets forgotten about. I mean, I've got here right away. The very first game of the season, we go up to Pittodrie and smash Aberdeen 5-0. And funny enough, by the halfway point of the season, we'd played Aberdeen 3 times. We beat them 5-0, 7-0, and 6-0. 2 of those games were at Pittodrie. So we really enjoyed Ragdoll and Aberdeen that season. But they had a weird season. They finished bottom of the league that year and didn't get relegated because of the SPL's new rules, where you had to have a 10,000-seater stadium, which in Scottish football is quite laughable when you think about some of the crowds that some of the teams get. But yeah, Falkirk won the first division and weren't allowed to get promoted because they didn't have a 10,000-seater stadium at Brockville. That's another story. But yeah, Aberdeen, weird season for them, finishing bottom, getting the 2 cup finals, not getting relegated. But yeah, they were definitely a punching bag for us all season. But yeah, we got up there. We also beat teams like St Johnstone 3-0. Bit of revenge for them beating us 3 times the season before, beating Hearts 4-0. We had a 5-1 win over Kilmarnock. Everything's going no too bad. We did lose to Motherwell and Dundee United in amongst the first 11 games, but things just came off the rails massively around about late October, when, of course, we went to Lyon to play a UEFA Cup game. And, of course, Liam, Henrik Larsson, goes over, and well, it's a horrible, horrible image when you see it, when he's lying on the ground.
Was it Lyon or was it Bordeaux?
It was Lyon. Bordeaux's coming next season. It's Lyon this season. Yep. And he ends up with that broken leg, and of course the image of his much like that. But apparently it's the shin pad that makes it look a lot worse than it is. But either way, it looks gruesome. It's not for the squeamish.
No, I had to look away at that one. At that point as well, you're thinking, God, that Larsson. And we never knew if he was going to be the same again as well, because it looked so bad as well. So, it was like a death in the family,
And that's the funny thing when you say we didn't know how he was going to recover, whether he would come back as good as he was, and he actually came better. I'm absolutely certain in my memory, the same night, Michael Moles at Rangers done his ligaments.
Oh, that was that
in the European game, and I'm sure it's the same night.
It's probably going to be the same week, because Champions League and UEFA Cup wouldn't be playing the same night. But you're right, it was a game away to Bayern Munich that he done his knee ligament.
And he was on fire for Rangers at the time, and he was scoring goals for fun. And I think he was out for the rest of the season, pretty much like Henrik was. But he never came back. Nothing like the player he was.
Yeah, nowhere near it.
And so sometimes like I say, just when you say there that we didn't know whether Henrik would come back from the leg break to be as good as he was, but we all know he came back better. But it just shows you sometimes a broken leg's better than the ligaments. But there you go.
Right. Oh, it's it was an amazing. Brown Warriors says, what a comeback season. It really, really was. It was incredible. Like he came back better. Like for me, you've got pre-leg break Larsson and post-leg break Larsson, and for me, post-leg break Larsson is he had a point to prove, and he really did prove it. But that's actually good knowledge, and I think you may be right there about the Michael Moles one, because it was a Champions League game that season where it was against Bayern Munich, so it could very well have been the exact same week.
I'm sure it was the same week, because I remember I was actually in Holland on holiday at the time. I watched that game in Holland.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I'll need to look up that one up, because but do you remember, Johnny, who John Barnes, again, keep in mind, no transfer windows, you can just sign players at any point. Who was his masterstroke idea to bring in as a replacement for Henrik Larsson after that injury? Now, don't get me wrong, it sprung on him. He wasn't expecting a leg break, but do you remember who he went out and signed to come in and try and fill the hole that Henrik Larsson had left?
Ian Wright.
Ian Wright, it was indeed. And in fairness, I think Ian Wright scores in his debut against Kilmarnock in that 5-1 win that I mentioned a moment ago. But yeah, Ian Wright had the unique attribute of being older than the actual manager. I think John Barnes was 35, Ian Wright was 36, or maybe they were 34 and 35. But yeah, when Ian Wright signed for us, he was actually older than the manager, which I thought was quite a job. But yeah, he came in, got a few goals initially earlier on, but say things are about to go very wrong, because only a couple of weeks after the leg break, we go to Ibrox in the first Glasgow derby of the season. And even though I believe we took the lead twice through Ayal Berkovic scoring, it all fell apart. If I remember correctly, there was the quite scandalous penalty decision against Paul Lambert, where he got kneed in the face and had most of his teeth knocked out, and they gave a penalty against him right on half-time, because we were going in at half-time going to be 2-1 up, I believe it was. And that would have been like, okay, we can regroup. We were 2-1 up. We can try and take it from there. Then you lose a goal right in half-time. A bloody penalty where he slides in, and he's the one that gets kneed in the face by Jorg Alberts. And that was made it 2-2 right on the break. And in the second half, we just capitulated, ended up losing 4-2. But yeah, that was the rot beginning to set in, wasn't it, Liam, under Barnes?
Oh yeah, and that whole penalty incident with Lambert was unbelievable. When you get sent off for like kneeing a guy, with your face, or put your face into a guy's knee. But you could see it coming apart at that point.
Aye. It was funny enough, I've not actually mentioned Lubo Moravcik at all during this season, because up to this point he hasn't actually contributed anything. It was a bit weird under Barnes where he seemed to just kind of drift in and out. The only highlight he has up until this point is actually one of his most famous highlights. In a game that we beat Hearts 4-0 quite early in the season, he does that one where he traps the ball with his backside. Where the ball's coming out wide, he watches it drop and then uses his backside basically to control the ball. He lets it bounce and then uses it. John McGinn would be proud basically, because you know what John McGinn's like, the way he uses his backside to shield the ball. I suppose he would be proud of that one. But yeah, that's like the only highlight he's got. But in the month of December, he goes on a wee bit of a run, scoring 4 goals by the end of the year. We have another 1-1 draw with Rangers, a game where we absolutely pounded them. Viduka gave us the lead. I think we hit the crossbar 3 or 4 times in that game, but we ended up drawing 1-1, which again just further summed it up. Things were just not going well. But of course, as we know, the headline is the most famous one in Scottish football history. Before we get to it, Johnny, the year 2000, the new millennium, a new century, a new millennium, we're heading into the year 2000. You know, Celtic come back for the winter break and they start off terribly by going 2-0 up against Hearts at a game at Celtic Park. Moravcik actually scored then. We end up losing 3-2, and then just a matter of days later, Super Cali go ballistic. Celtic are atrocious. We all know it. Celtic play Inverness Cali Thistle in a Scottish Cup game, who I believe Inverness were a second division team at this point in time. Moravcik's got the unwanted accolade in this game of scoring an own goal. He actually bundled the ball or sliced the ball into his own net for the second Inverness goal. And but yeah, the stories of that game, I believe Ian Wright's talked about it in interviews, saying it's one of the weirdest things he's ever experienced. He went in at half time and Mark Viduka just walked in, just threw his boots down and basically said, "Fuck this." And him and John Barnes had a big, massive row. He's like, wasn't going back out there for the second half. Viduka just basically refused to play in the second half. Ian Wright says he was just sitting there, watched it all unfold in front of him. Like, I can't believe this. But yes, Celtic go on to lose 3-1. And John Barnes' tea was out, wasn't it, Johnny?
It certainly was. Kind of bittersweet memories about that game, if I'm being honest, because that was actually played on I think it was a Wednesday night it got played. It was meant to be played on the Saturday.
Yes.
I always remember I was taking David from the bus. I was taking David to his first ever Celtic game. Thought, got to make sure I pick a game that we're going to win, because there's no way I want to take my boy to his first ever Celtic game. We come back and we've lost. And we'd literally just arrived outside the stadium when just heard it on the radio coming on that there was a bit of breaking news that there was the potential the game was going to be off because of wind damage to I think it was the guttering on the.
There's what Patrick McLaughlin's like he said. Yep.
Anyway, we got there early enough. We took a walk right at the front, cut it quick short, found out the game was off. We ended up down at Barrowfield. We managed to get the boys into because I took my nephew with me as well, into the training. They got to watch because I'd heard that they'd gone down to Barrowfield to do some training. They got some training done, and as they were coming off, David and his nephew, my nephew, got players' autographs. Then, of course, we went through on the Wednesday, and well, we got humped. So it was bittersweet memories for that one, But hey,
yeah. See, it was.
But like you said, it was Was it literally the next day that Barnes got sacked?
Next day.
It was, wasn't it?
I think Paul Lambert said in interviews that, getting out of the ground that night was quite a hostile experience. People like to talk about the infamous shark throwing a couple of seasons ago. I think the Inverness one from 20 years before maybe makes that pale in comparison, because Paul Lambert was saying with his wife driving out of the ground, they were fearing they weren't going to get out of there alive because the fans were pretty angry. I say the way things have fell apart for us in the league, we're way behind Rangers at this point. We've dropped silly points to some teams like Hearts just a few days before. 2-0 up at Celtic Park, end up losing 3-2. It was all just coming apart for John Barnes. Yeah, the next day he was gone, mate. That was it. It was the end of John Barnes. But yeah, in amongst all the cars, Larsson's out injured for the rest of the season. Viduka, he's thrown a straw up against Inverness. Different forward partnerships, Viduka with Birchall, Tommy Johnson's constantly in and out injury, he gets a game here and there. Ian Wright was only a short-term deal. He was sold, I believe, to Burnley, I think he went to, so he didn't even, again, this is before the days when FIFA brought in rules where you can only play for like 2 teams in a season. He then moved on there, I believe it was, or maybe it was like Nottingham Forest or something, but yeah, he moves away and then But despite all this madness, despite all the carnage, not long after the Inverness game, Lubomir Moravcik is the one that steps up because we played Kilmarnock in the League Cup semi-final. Despite all of this, Celtic do find themselves in the semi-final of the League Cup, and he actually scores the winner. Kilmarnock, they're quite resolute, it's a real tough game. So it's when the League Cup semi-finals were played in January or February, and it's winter, it's cold, it's a midweek game at Hampden where the crowd's even worse than what it usually is. Kilmarnock are just 10 men behind the ball, but it's midway through the second half. He unlocks them with a brilliant header that bounces in off the crossbar. A perfect cross. I think it's like McNamara crosses it, but he just waits for it, just guides it perfectly, and it bounces off the crossbar and in over the line. Yeah. And ended up being the winner, puts us into a cup final. Despite all the turmoil of the 1999-2000 season, this team have just made it to a final. But that was that's a cracking finish, that one, wasn't it, Liam? Like that, we guided header. He just waits for it to drop and just gets a good bit of power on it, good neck muscles.
He's a great header of a ball. I mean, right for that first Rangers game we played in, that second goal, I remember is the way he directed the ball with the header, the goalkeeper couldn't even move.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of these things as well, with both him and Larsson and all that, were unbelievably deceptive, in their height and that. But you're right, the way he could get up for a header, but it was all technique, right? Like precision and power. It was because he was just a classic football player. He had great technical skills, and that's what you always hear again when we're playing internationals like the Czech Republic. Got great technical skills and all that, and somehow they managed to develop players that have really great, authority in that when they're getting up into the air and hitting balls and that, and just technique. It's everything, We tend to coach that out of players. We go for power rather than precision.
Coaching here in this country is just basically just running around playing games of fives and stuff like that. It's the coaching at grassroots level needs to be massively revamped from top to bottom. But yeah, most of the time it's always just we kick about, running really fast and playing games of fives rather than concentrating more on the technical side of it. But hey, you say Pavel Nedved idolised him, so I don't know where Pavel Nedved got it from, watching old Lubo. But Johnny, we've got through to the final, and as I said earlier on, this would be a history-making moment for Lubo Moravcik. We go on to March to play Aberdeen in the final, the team that we've been ragdolling all season. One of the few highlights for Celtic that year, games against Aberdeen. But yeah, we only beat them 2-0 in the final, so we let our standards slip a wee bit there. Vida Rusev and Tommy Johnson score, but of course, what's significant for Lubo here is at the ripe old age of 34, he wins his first ever winners' medal in professional football. Astounding that would be his first, because again, you think the level time he played in France, at the level he played, there surely must have been like a cup somewhere, but no, it was this final against Aberdeen was his first ever winners' medal. Bit amazing, that, isn't it?
It's quite stunning, actually. I mean, I know there was the opportunity for him to go to Marseille, which he spoke about earlier on, but I just can't believe that because Saint Etienne they had been quite a decent club, or a big club in France. But I think when Lubo was there, they were probably they fell away, and they sort of middled out, not bottomed out, but middle. I don't think they were ever in contention for winning things. And I can't believe that even in France that whichever teams would be at the top at that time, Marseille didn't come back for him, or whoever else was winning the trophies in France, they hadn't sort of, we'll go in and get him, or somebody else from the continent, because although we might not have known about him in the United Kingdom, and our shores were being quite, I can't think of the word I'm looking for now, shut off, we were very narrow-minded and blinkered. You're not going to tell me other teams on the continent would have picked him up that were of a standard that would win domestic competitions. But we're just glad that they didn't, because finally we had a man who knew about him and brought him across here to a team that's capable of winning domestic trophies, and that's exactly what happened for him.
It did indeed.
Amazing to think at 34 that was his first. Glad it wasn't his last.
Oh, definitely. But it's one of those good trivia questions. It's like, what's Lubomir Moravcik's first trophy in football? And most people would think it'd be a French one. It's like, no, it was the Scottish League Cup in the year 2000 when he was 34 years old. But yeah, that is like the only highlight of that season. It's a miserable season. And I'm not looking forward to the day comes where I'm going to have to cover the 99-2000 season in more depth, because It's not a lot to talk about, although I did say we will cover these type of seasons. We will break it down and say what went wrong. Well, everything went wrong that season, literally everything. So the end of the season is pretty much a format. It's a procession. Rangers are going to go on and win the league. They actually tanked us 4-0 at Ibrox, the game just after we won that League Cup. That's the game where Kenny Dalglish took Vidal Rousseff along to Baird's Bar with the League Cup, and they did a press conference from there. A bizarre moment, but he did the press conference for the Rangers game there. Then we get beat 4-0, and the last 4 or 5 games of the season were just a formality, really, just playing for pride. There was another scalping of Aberdeen in there, of course, because why wouldn't there be? We ragdolled them 5-1. That's the game you were talking about earlier on, where Jim Leighton couldn't hold on to the ball. He makes 2 mistakes. He tries to pass one out from defence. It comes right to Lubo, and he just takes one touch and he just clips it over Leighton, chips him. And then the other goal is that one where he just blasts at him and he fumbles into the net. But yeah, Aberdeen, man, it's just got absolutely destroyed that season. But yeah, in terms of that season, total damn squib. 1 trophy to show for it, which isn't much to really shout about. But don't worry, guys, because there is a saviour who is just around the corner. Everybody sound the klaxon. It's the Martin O'Neill klaxon. St. Martin is the headline because, in comes Martin O'Neill. It was time to stop fucking about when it was Celtic, because we'd had, obviously, Wim Jansen. We took a chance on him, and it worked. We took a chance on Joseph Venglos. It didn't work. We took a massive chance on John Barnes. That definitely didn't work. Kenny Dalglish wasn't for staying around, so Celtic again. Gus Hiddink's name was strongly linked at this point, and it was Dermot Desmond that stepped in and was like, "Nope, I want Martin O'Neill's manager." And I think I've heard Martin O'Neill in an interview saying that Alex Ferguson also played a part in it by phoning him personally and saying, "You need to take the Celtic job." So Alex Ferguson done us a wee favour there. But yeah, in comes Martin O'Neill in the summer of 2000. He's inherited a squad that's pretty broken, which is a running theme for Celtic at this point. It feels like every new manager that's coming in is inheriting quite a broken squad, because it's been another season of disappointment. But he comes in after his very successful spell at Leicester. He's took them up into the Premier League, kept them up there for a few years, established them as like a solid Premier League outfit. They've won the League Cup twice. He's took them into European football as well. But yeah, he comes up to Glasgow to become Celtic manager. I say he's inherited a team with like Henrik Larsson, you know, the guys like Paul Lambert in there. Obviously, Lubomir Moravcik is in the team. He added his own big names. We did an episode on Chris Sutton just a few weeks ago. He was also a huge personality added. He brought in guys like Didier Agat, a very, very shrewd move. For £50,000 or something like that from Hibs. He brought in obviously Alan Thompson, Yusuf Al-Hadden. Just added to it. And yeah, of course, we know the story. We go on and win the treble. Obviously, Lubomir Moravcik is playing a massive part this season. Now, Celtic actually start the season going 16 league games unbeaten at this point in time, because again, after the couple of seasons we just came off of, we suddenly go 16 games unbeaten, which of course includes the very famous 6-2 victory over Rangers at the start of September. It was at the end of August, start of September. Phenomenal day. And of course, we haven't covered the 2000-2001 season in depth. And when we do, that'll probably take up a massive chunk of the show, I would imagine, because that game is phenomenal. But yeah, in that run, the racked up victories, like beating they won 4-2 at Tynecastle. We also beat Hearts 6-1 as well. Maybe Hearts have turned into the new Aberdeen this season, getting absolutely ragdolled. St Johnstone were beaten 4-1. Yeah, everything was going pretty well. We only teams to drop points to at the time were Aberdeen and Motherwell, who managed to get draws out as. But yeah, of course, it all comes to a crash in the end when we actually lose 5-1 at Ibrox. So there's a 6-2 at Celtic Park and then a 5-1 at Ibrox. Bizarre first 2 Glasgow derbies that season. But yeah, in terms of like Lubo, I say he's getting his goals assists, but there's one goal in particular in the early part of that season that stands out in a game against St Johnstone where we beat them 4-1. Now, I've seen people talk about this again. This is one of these ones that I think, again, where over the years the stories evolved. People say he scored directly from a corner. He did and he didn't, to put it lightly. He took a short corner to Didier Agat, who stopped the ball for him, and then he bent it into the corner. He didn't take it directly from the corner, but he was still out in the corner flag. But again, Liam, that just summed the guy up, that he had that in his locker. Even just the audacity to even try that, because when you see like players try stuff like that to try to score direct for a corner, usually it backfires on them, or sometimes you'll get words, or the opposition will think it's a bit disrespectful, try to score direct for a corner. But it was quite ballsy for him to just go for it, and he's technically great, but he put so much power on it as well. Like, it's not like, he gently floated into the back post. When you actually watch the goal back in that goal montage, he proper wellies it as well. Oh, muted yourself again, the police cars.
I remember watching that in the pub, and everybody
Aye.
just looked, and it was like, did he mean that? Of course he meant it. You could tell as well, positioning the body. I mean, I don't know if it's like something he even practices, but it was just like, get to me, I fancy as a shot, and everybody knows what he's like. And so Dida just gave it to him, and boom. I mean, what an angle that was. And I didn't look like a cross, because you've seen his crosses, they're pinpoint. That was definitely a shot, and I know what wonderful. I mean, I love that cheek about him as well. He was cheeky. I watched one of the clips with Martin O'Neill, and he was saying that Martin O'Neill didn't really fancy him when he came to the team. He says, because you're going to have to do a lot of running. And I don't think you've got running in you at 34. Is it 34?
He would have just turned 35. His birthday's in June, so this would be 35 years old going into the season. So
this was Martin O'Neill telling the story, and I was watching the clip, and he says, Lubo, he didn't say a word to him. He just looked at O'Neill and just said, watch me as a player. And he just said, and at that point, he says, we never talked about it. We never mentioned it again. You know, he didn't need to run a bit daft. And he had football intelligence.
See, I wonder what you've said there ties into this, because from reading the Celtic wiki, with the report they've got on this game, apparently Moravcik had announced publicly around about this time that he would leave Celtic at the end of this coming season. Yeah. Of course, he doesn't. But do you think that might have played a part of it? Maybe that's what was... And maybe with that goal that he scored, maybe he was trying to prove a point there, because he put some real venom on that cross, and it's like, he had a point to prove there with that one. He's kind of showing the manager. Because I think when he celebrates as well, when you see the goal, he runs towards the bench celebrating as well. So I wonder if that was a message to Martin, that it's like,
I don't know. There was definitely one of them type of goals where normally if you see somebody scoring from a situation like that, you say, well, was it a cross or was it a shot? I don't think anybody ever questioned that one. We all knew that was he knew what he was doing with that one. I mean, and it may well be to prove points or whatever, but whatever it was, he certainly did.
He might have made his mind up the season before, with John Barnes and all that carry on. Because I remember thinking, it's like, well, that's Dr. Joe gone. Will he go now as well?
Yep.
No, because you knew that they two had some sort of relationship and a bond, and then when you see that shit show that followed him as well, so maybe he wasn't expecting to be part of O'Neill's team, and then at that point, once they proved himself, you can see why he got that extra year.
Oh, and by the way, Sean Barlow just pointed out there was a guy on the back post as well, and he still managed to pick his spot perfectly. But it's some goal. Again, if you've been living under a rock and haven't ever seen this goal, go out your way to find it. It's definitely worth looking up, because it's very rare to see a player score from out of that angle. It's a phenomenal goal. Now, funny enough, around about this time as well, he was so agonisingly close to getting a big winning goal in a European fixture, because we get drawn against Bordeaux in the UEFA Cup second round, I believe it would have been. Around about that time, it would have been the second round. And we got a very credible draw in France, drawing one each. And obviously, this is the days when away goals were a thing. But yeah, Christophe Dugarry, I believe, gave Bordeaux the lead, and then Henrik Larsson got an equaliser for us. So you get a 1-1 draw with a French outfit. It's no easy at all. But yeah, we come back to Glasgow, and it's obviously 0-0 till quite late in the game, and Moravcik actually puts us ahead, but maybe 70-something minutes, and you're like, might actually do this here, and getting by, knocking a French team out is a big one, but no, unfortunately it wasn't to be. Mcginlay'S Landes, I believe the player is, equalises late on, and then scores the winner in extra time. I think Russell's brought his name up a few times when we've been talking about this era. Mcginlay'S Landes, that was the name. So I remember Christophe Dugarry that played for Bordeaux. He was a French international, won the World Cup, but ended up at Birmingham City not long after this. But that was at a time when English Premier League teams were starting to get filled with money. You were seeing some crazy players rocking up at like Middlesbrough. Like the one that always stands out for me was Mendieta at Middlesbrough for years, and it's like, Mendieta, man, like how? I mean, he played for this team, Valencia. No, it's not Partick Thistle, it's Valencia. But yeah, he was there for years. Who was
the time in the Silver Fox that ended up at
Ravenelli? End up at Dundee as well.
And then Dundee,
Aye. But yeah, that's that era with the Premier League where lower-rated teams are getting all these mad points, like Djokayev turning up at Bolton, Ivan Campo at Bolton and stuff like that. So, yeah, this is the madness starting to creep in. But I remember Dugarry being a bit of a baller. He scored the goal in France, but yeah, it was Landes that dumped us out of the UEFA Cup.
I think he ended up at Sunderland, didn't he? Did he go to Sunderland?
Yes, it sounds like that would be maybe Russell be in the comments, because he's the expert on Liz Landes. His names came up a few times on the show and been talking about this era. But yeah, it sounds like plausible that he would end up there. But yeah, in the second, in terms of like Lubo, I say he's that close to getting us that winner. It wasn't to be in the night, but in the end we would recover in terms of like, it wouldn't be any sort of damage to us in terms of domestic football. You wouldn't have that European hangover, the disappointment of going out to Bordeaux in such heartbreaking circumstances had no real knock-on effect. We just went from strength to strength in the league. In the second half of the season, Lubo would notch up 5 more league goals and a goal in the Scottish Cup against Stranraer. But its most noteworthy performance, I think, in this season, much like how his Celtic career started early on with that 2 goals against Rangers in the 5-1 game, Celtic have officially wrapped up the league. We've got one more Celtic and Rangers game to go, and it's at Ibrox. And Rangers, their ego's bruised, definitely, because we haven't just won the league, we've absolutely trounced them. We've finished, 21 points behind the season before, and I believe in Anil's first season, it was, 19 points or something, we ended up winning the league by. It's something absurd anyway. It's a huge point swing. But we're going obviously to Ibrox for this last game, and we've not won at Ibrox in quite a while at this point, right? And I can remember going into this game, and my mood in it was more like, whatever happens. We've won the league anyway. It doesn't make a difference. But you still want to, put a marker down here and prove a point. And oh boy, did we certainly prove a point. So the game goes in at halftime 0-0. In the second half, Lubo Moravcik comes on and opens the scoring. Nice wee 1-2 pass with Henrik Larsson, where he's in on goal, just bends it past Stefan Klos. But the second goal that he scores is incredible, and there's a few reasons why. One, he's 35 years old. He absolutely leaves Fernando Rickson in his rear view mirror. It's a long ball, and Sean Maloney, who's came on as a sub at that point, just sort of flicks the ball on in the centre circle, and it goes in behind Rickson, who's at the right back position. And Lubo Moravcik, again, I must stress, 35-year-old Lubo Moravcik turns on the afterburners and absolutely rinses Rickson, gets to the ball first. Rickson goes to try and tackle him, but he does a quick switch from left to right. Rickson ends up running right past him, and then he's just got a clear shot at goal and just bends it past Stefan Klos in the Rangers goal at the near post. Now, Liam, did you happen to notice in the Gift from God DVD, early on in it, they show a goal that he scored for St. Etienne, which is identical to this goal? Because the minute I saw it, I went, I've seen that goal before. I've seen that type of goal before. He scored an identical one for St. Etienne in France, where he's ran that distance, cut in from the same angle. A defender tried to tackle him, completely missed him, and with a quick switch of the feet, and he's just got a nice wee shot in at the near post, and it was like, I can't obviously back it to the one against Rangers. I say, 35-year-old, where did that pace burst come from? Unbelievable.
I think that's the sort of pace you find and you develop when you look to get a contract extension.
Well, maybe.
Well, yes, we can follow that lead. But I think he just looked like he had something to prove at that point as well. And in fact, to see him do that at 35, he might have thinking that might be his last, his last pick of a ball. If it was, wow, fantastic, But there's still better things to come for Lubo.
It definitely was. And in the end, to say we'd win that game 3-0. The Henrik Larsson goal, of course, where he goes round the goalkeeper, Johnny, and finishes it from pretty much on the byline. Although one thing that we always forget is Sean Maloney was that close to poaching that goal. I believe that was his 50th goal that season.
It was Henrik's 50th goal. I think if Maloney had poached that goal, I don't know if he'd have got it out. Well, I don't think he'd have got out the stadium and I'll tell you something. Well, we all know that Larsson can be, Larsson can be a hardy little fucker when he wants, but you know what I mean? He can be, if he's not happy, he'd never go over that if he pinched that goal off for Henrik, because we were all desperate for him not only to score his 50th goal of the season, 50 goals of the season, because he'd been chasing it for a little while. When it came to one more goal, he's got it, and it's against them next.
Against them.
I mean, we were just put the tin hat on the whole season on everything,
It was. It was all way to finish, I say 3-0. And that would actually become a running theme because also we'd wrap up the 2 cups as well that season with 3-0 score lines. We beat Kilmarnock 3-0. In the League Cup final, the Henrik Larsson final, despite Chris Sutton getting sent off and being down to 10 men, Henrik Larsson just went, nah, not today, boys, and just basically grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck, scored the hat-trick. And, of course, we beat Hibs 3-0 in the Scottish Cup final to wrap up our first treble since the Jock Stein era. It must have been 1969. Would probably been the last one, but yeah, Jackie McNamara comes off the bench and scores, and then Larsson gets 2 in that final. So yeah, Lubo ends up getting 3 winners' medals that season. So he's up to 4 if you're keeping a running tally of it. I say it's in the twilight of his career. But yeah, as I said earlier on, he'd obviously made noise about he was going to leave Celtic at the end of the season. But no, we've now got Champions League football, a crack at it anyway, something that he's never ever played in. As we said earlier on, if things had went differently, he might have actually won the Champions League if that Marseille deal had happened. But yeah, he's going to have one more crack at it, so he decides to stay on for one more season, albeit he would be used quite sparingly. However, we'll go on that one now. The last dance, I said 2001-2002 season, the final season of Lubomir Moravcik. And actually quite early on, he'd only scored 6 goals that season, but early on in the season, he did score that goal, which you see in the ending credits here on the Boise bus. I've seen somebody mention it in the comments already, his best goal. It's, again, one of my favourite terms, an absolute thunder bastard against Hibs at Easter Road, where I think we take a short free kick and just play it to him. He takes one touch with his left foot to steady himself, and then just, again, going back to what you said, Johnny, about that power he can generate, absolutely leathers it. It goes like a rocket right into the top corner. Leaves the Hibs goalkeeper with no chance. We end up winning the game 4-1. But yeah, when people say that goal against Hibs, everyone knows what you're talking about because it's a net buster, isn't it? If that net ain't there, then it's still travelling, mate.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. It's one of the ones when you actually watch it from the sort of behind the goal, the replay of it, and you actually look at the ball as it's travelling through the air. It's not even spinning. It just seems to be, like that, and it's just flowing through the air. There's no spinning, there's no rotation, there's nothing. It's just like it's static, apart from the fact of the speed that it's traveling into the net. I know that didn't make sense, static and traveling, but you know what I mean. It wasn't. It wasn't burling.
Yeah.
It wasn't spinning. It was like a fucking exocet missile. I mean, it really was.
It hit and it stayed hit basically.
Yeah.
But I know the type of ball you're talking about where it's not actually like moving like that. It's just it's an incredible goal. I'd say it's referred to as that goal against Hibs when you're talking about Lubo's goals because it's one that every fan instantly goes to. Plus, we had a really nice away kit on that day, and that's that white one NTL with black shorts. That's a classic, that one. But yeah, the big thing, of course, Liam, is we've got Champions League football this season, but amazingly, Lubo's not really getting used. And again, it probably comes back to that thing that you're saying with Martin O'Neill. Maybe he didn't use him as much for reasons of a lot of running was going to be involved. But yeah, we play Ajax, obviously the qualifiers. He's not involved in that. He isn't involved in the first 3 group games because we're drawing in with Juventus, Porto, and Rosenborg. Of course, famously, we were meant to play Rosenborg in the first game, but it got postponed because it was actually on September 11th, 2001, I believe the game was scheduled for. And obviously, all games get called off that day. So we actually started away in Turin, of all the places to go. The first game of the group campaign, our first ever Champions League outing, was sent to Juventus for the first game. But as the story goes, and we all know, Celtic put up a really good fight that night, 2-0 down, got it back to 2-2. Nicola Amoroso, I believe the Brazilian striker's named, takes a dodgy dive at the end. They get a penalty, they win it, but Martin O'Neill, obviously he's like, extraordinary. He's absolutely furious. So, and he's right, we were extraordinary that night. We were ripped off. But of course, we end up recovering, beating Porto and beating Rosenborg back-to-back. But then, I say Lubo doesn't play in any of these games at all. He only makes his first appearance in the Champions League in the 3-0 loss away in Porto. And then he comes off the bench as well in the 2-0 loss to Rosenborg. So far, his Champions League dream, his European dream, isn't really going to plan. But then we get to fixture number 6, and it's win or bust for Celtic. They must beat Juventus and hope that Rosenborg can do us a favour. Maybe Harold Bratback will come back and bail us out here, save us after scoring 2 against us. But the performance against Juventus is absolutely sublime. I believe he was playing in the middle of the park as well. He wasn't playing out wide, but he sets up the first goal for Val Haren. he sort of twists and turns, gets onto his right foot, but originally it's one of those quickly moves from left to right, can bamboozles the defender, just clips a nice way across to Valharin, just throws himself at it and heads into the net. Second goal, he takes the corner that Chris Sutton just again throws himself at to score. And the third goal was a penalty, but the fourth goal was a free kick out wide left that Moravcik takes. And I think it might be Baldi heads it on into the path of Chris Sutton, who then volleys it. It's that volley against Juventus. But what a performance, mate. Like, I forgot how, like, when I went back and watched the highlights, I was like, I forgot how good Moravcik was that night. That was a real, this is what I can do at this level. 36-year-old at that point.
Do you think that was one of the things, maybe John as well, you might remember it, was because I remember we were all dying for Moravcik to get a
John's
game.
Been disconnected.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
Right, so
he'll come back in a second.
we were dying for Moravcik to get a game. And I watched one of the things, you know, when Celtic TV do that thing, like their best ever game.
Yeah.
They did it in Moravcik, and he kept talking about how appreciative he was to Martin for letting him play that game. And I don't know if that's one where he's went and said, hey, listen, you know, we got nothing to lose here. You know, get me on, let me play, let me try my style and see what happens. Because that seemed to be how we developed at that point with Moravcik getting into that squad. It was almost like Martin doing him a favour, you know?
See, with hindsight being 2020, it's like, because I see the games that he played in were like, you know, losing to Porto and Rosenborg, stuff like that. He came on as a sub. Again, with hindsight being 2020, could he have been the difference maybe? And those two games, maybe, you know, could have started the game and it would have went a wee bit differently, because those are the games that essentially killed us in that group. You know, it became a running theme for Celtic at that stage in Europe in the Champions League. You know, we'd always do really well in the home games, but the away games were just killers for us. But yeah, when I looked it up on the Celtic wiki, looking at the team lineups, I was surprised to see didn't play against Ajax in any of the two games in the qualifiers, didn't play in any of the first three fixtures in this group, but I came off the subs bench against Porto, we lost 3-0, and came off the bench in a 2-0 loss Rosenborg. So it's like, look at the performance he put in against Juve and just think, could he have been a difference, you know? You think a wee bit hindsight there, but that's why hindsight is 2020, mate. That is why it is. Also, Johnny still has to come back. I don't know if his internet's completely out or he's just accidentally hit a button. Maybe he doesn't realise he's been disconnected. I don't know. But yeah, he just randomly vanished there. But hopefully he rejoins.
He might be still talking away, Phil.
He might still be, actually. He might still be. Yeah, because I sent him the link on. Hopefully he comes back in, man, because obviously we're getting near the end of the show. I want to get his final thoughts on it. So, but yeah, we'll put on, because obviously we finished third in that group, and this is at the time when they brought in the system where you finish third in the group, you drop into the UEFA Cup. Obviously, it's now the Europa League. But yeah, we dropped down, and this is also this is the time when it wasn't the second half of the season. We would actually play only a few weeks later before Christmas. And it was Valencia that we drew. Now, keep in mind, Valencia are just off the back of being in the Champions League final 2 years in a row. So they weren't making this easy for us. But yeah, we lose 1-0 out in Spain. We have a really good showing at Celtic Park and beat them 1-0 there, 1-1 on aggregate. But yeah, that's the game that Chris Sutton was up against Roberto Ayala and gave him a real hard time that night. And it was like, well, Ayala, you're maybe one of the best centre-backs in the world, Argentinian international. You know, watch me go here. And yeah, he ended up giving Ayala all sorts of hell that night. But yeah, Celtic ended up losing on penalty shootout. Oh, there's Johnny coming back now. And we had him. There we go. Oh, he's changed his angle and everything. There you go. Right,
I don't know what happened. My internet's just crashed. I don't know why.
Technology, mate.
I'm now on my phone, so.
That's how we're getting near the end. So I hope you're going to get back on so we can get the sort of final thoughts. But yeah, we're just talking there about the Juve game, the great performance. Obviously, he didn't play, you know, in the other group games, or he came on as a sub at times when the games were already lost. Could he have made a difference? But also, we dropped down. We played Valencia in the UEFA Cup. I ended up going out on penalties. So yeah, the one crack that Lubo got at Champions League football, you know, it didn't quite go how he would have wanted it to, but. Yeah, Johnny, I was just saying, like, Liam, that performance against Juve was just unbelievable when you go back and watch it. It's a true highlight of his career, that one.
Oh, there's my internet back working. To be honest with you, what I remember about that Juventus game is I didn't actually see it live because I had my cousin had come back to live in the UK from South Africa, and months before it, she'd bought tickets to go and see a comedian at the Adam Smith's theatre in Kirkcaldy. I don't know if you remember him or if you remember the name. You might not remember the actual comedian's name, but I think it was Mark Little. He was more famous for being Joe Mangle in Neighbours.
Right, okay.
And I said to her stupidly, I said, I'll go with you then, because she had nobody else to go with. I said, I'll go with you. Of course, months later down the line, this bloody game comes up, and so it's so I went. So anyway, I ended up going to the theatre with her, and it was actually not a bad show. I'd left specific instructions: get the game taped. When I walk in, nobody speaks to me, nobody tells me the score, nobody tells me anything. But unfortunately, we didn't quite make it back to the house without finding out what the score was. So I didn't watch it all. I didn't actually watch all the game. I just sort of, hit the remote control on the forward buttons, Yeah. So obviously just seen the bits and the highlights on YouTube over the years and whatnot. But a bit of a disappointment not to have got something out of it.
Yeah, it was become quite typical for Celtic. Getting by the hurdle of European football in the second half of a season would be quite a sticking point for us. And I say the way this tournament worked is you dropped out of the group stages, and it wasn't like in the second half of the season. It was literally just a few weeks after that. We actually played them in like the tail end of November, I believe it was. But yeah, funny enough, the next season we would go all the way to European final after years and years of not getting by European football at Christmas time. We actually went and got to a final the next year. But yeah, in terms of Lubo's big goal at the Champions League here, it wasn't to be, and he was used sparingly for the rest of that season. His final goal came at Almondvale against Livingston in a 3-1 victory. And in the end, Celtic go on and win the 2002 title, but ended up losing the Scottish Cup final to Rangers, and Rangers knocked us out of the League Cup semi-final. So even though the title was always the most important thing at the end of the day, we've got the title, we had a decent showing in the Champions League, but yeah, the two domestic cups kind of got away from us. So bare minimum that season of what we needed to do. But yeah, got that. We've also got another crack at the Champions League next season. But yeah, Lubomir Moravcik didn't even stay for the Scottish Cup final. We actually transferred officially before the final and went to a team, funny enough, I mentioned last week, was that Jeff United that Atletico Madrid signed a player off of, a Japanese team, because Joseph Venglos was their manager. He was managing out in the J League at that point in time. Jeff United's Chiba in Japan. So you went to reunite with Joseph Venglos at the end of the 2001-2002 season. And that was the end of Lubomir Moravcik's time at Celtic, his 4 years. So we'll obviously sum up now his lasting legacy at the club, the sort of final words. So Lubomir Moravcik, his time from October 1998 to June 2002. In that time, he made 129 appearances, scored 35 goals in all competitions, created lots of magical moments, absolutely sublime vision, comfortable on both feet, incredible passing range, goals, all types of goals, headers, shots with power, finesse in them. He was absolutely phenomenal. Set piece specialist, free kicks. He did it all. And he truly was labelled a gift from God because of the £300,000 price tag. But as Lubo himself has said, and this is a quote that I took off of the Celtic Wiki, because I thought, that's the perfect ending quote that you want. Lubo said, "My favourite time was at Celtic, my most special time in my career. They said I was a gift from God, but it was the opposite. Celtic was a gift from God to me. Celtic is unique." What a way. God bless Lubo Moravcik, and God bless Dr. Joseph Venglos for bringing him to us. But of course, guys, the big question is, and everybody says it, just imagine if we'd signed this guy a few years before. Just imagine it. But then again, he would have to have played in like a Celtic team with Tony Cascarino and stuff like that. So yeah, if we signed him in the sort of early 90s, when, don't get me wrong, we obviously would get him a lot younger, but yeah, he would have to have played alongside that. But just imagine though, getting this guy in the prime of his career, 26, 27-year-old. Oh man, what a find it would have been. But the 4 years we got out of Liam, phenomenal. Memories that will last a lifetime.
I think it was brilliant, just a breath of fresh air. We were seeing the world open up at that point as well, and so to discover a gem like that was great. Everyone was coming out of France and all that, and for us to just get that wee gift for Dr. Joe yeah, it really made watching Celtic. I think he was one of these entertainers as well, and we're always looking for an entertainer. And I think Lubo had that in spades. It was always be that one wee magic moment that he could do, like outside flicky his boot, or like a wee dodgy run or something like that. That just takes out two players and gives Larson plenty of space. I think he's magic is the way I would sum him up. I thought we needed a bit of magic at that time, and he came in. If I'm looking at players now, like we've got Kyogo, what's he, 26, 27?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how he develops. Will he fill up that into that Lubo type mold, or is it going to be Hatate, or you can see similarities in some of the players that we're getting from Japan, maybe.
Yeah.
Kyogo definitely being one. He could be. You could see him going to a club in like 5 years and becoming like a Moravcik.
Well, Johnny, I'll bring in that one because that's something that Mark said on the show. He said that Jota is the most skillful player he's ever seen in a Celtic shirt. Do you think against Lubo? Do you think Lubo's got a stake to that one? Put you on the spot, mate.
I'm going to try and be diplomatic here. Mark speaks a lot of good sense when he's on the show, and I'm not saying he's not, but I think Jota maybe has to do it for 2 or 3 years before we say that. Because Moravcik, I couldn't possibly say anything about Moravcik that's not already been said by countless supporters. But when we speak about Moravcik, what I'm really pleased about with Moravcik is when he signed for us, we were ridiculed. Celtic as a football club were ridiculed. Celtic supporters were probably, other supporters like myself were getting ridiculed in their workplaces about us signing this 33-year-old. Never mind has been, as far as we were concerned, in this narrow-minded Scotland that we lived in at the time. He wasn't even a has-been. He was a never-been. We'd never heard of him. And he rammed all of that down everybody's throat. We could never tell, is he left-footed, is he right-footed? You spoke about his ability on he could turn on the sixpence, keep the ball under control. Probably not a lot of players spend only 4 years at a club and are considered legends. Yeah, I think Lubo is. He was, despite what he said, he was our gift from God. He was just to have got him for 300,000, and I'm just glad for him that he rammed everything down everybody's throats when he arrived at Celtic. That he rammed it all right back down the likes of Hugh Keevins' throat. The very fact he used John Spencer in the same sentence as Moravcik is laughable. But again, as I said, that was the narrow-mindedness of not just us in Scotland, but the journalists as well. We've never heard of him. Can't be that much good. He's 33. Never heard of him. Can't be that good. But I don't think Jota could get close to him, I suppose. But at the minute, I wouldn't agree with Mark on that one. But as Mark's always saying, and he's right, we're all entitled to our own opinions. But I don't agree with Mark on that one.
That's fair enough. But yeah, just what I said earlier on about Hugh Keevins, I know it was the days before the internet. It was the juggernaut it is now. But at the end of the day, you're a journalist. You should have contacts that could have been able. You just pick up the phone and try and get the sort of info on this guy. No due diligence was done by Keevins or any of them, really. But yeah, God bless Lubo Moravcik for shoving it all down their throat. But that does indeed conclude our Lubo Moravcik episode. Now, before, of course, we head off, we shall go back to the trivia from the start of the show. So for the benefit of anyone that came in late, tonight's question was, Lubo Moravcik scored his first ever Celtic goals in a game against Rangers. Since Lubo achieved that in 1998, there are 4 other Celtic players who scored their first goal for the club in that fixture, Celtic Rangers, whether you want to call them Sevco or whatever. Either way, Glasgow Derby, Old Firm, whatever you want to say. But yeah, Celtic Rangers fixture, there are 4 other players who have scored their first Celtic goal. So, Liam, do you have any answers you wish to throw at me?
Ramon Vega.
No. No.
I know there's a fullback.
They're the hard, these ones. These 4 hard.
There's a centre-back in there.
There is a centre-back in there, but a different era.
I know.
One. Yeah.
There's
what about you, Johnny? Have you got any you want to throw at me?
I did have a couple written down, but when you talk about centre back, I'm going to start. His first goal for Celtic, not his debut goal, but his first goal, no, not a goal on his debut,
Yeah,
but
that's
his
correct.
goal for Celtic was against Rangers.
Against Rangers, that's it. It's not necessarily a debut goal, it's the first goal for the club
Right.
came against Rangers.
Centre half,
Yep.
a different era, but yeah.
No, that's not bad. You're getting closer with the error. You're warm now. You're definitely in the right. Somebody said it in the comments. I've seen somebody say it in the comments already, but you're in the right ballpark now. Now, here's a freaky one. See, two of the players, they came in, these goals came in the same game. And today is an anniversary of that exact game because a Twitter account that posts every single day, and on this day, Celtic video. One of the games was in 2006 on this day, the 23rd of September. And the two goal scorers that day, it was their first goals for the club. So 2006, who was the manager in 2006? Strachan. So Strachan era.
Oh, that's hard.
One of them's a very controversial one, very controversial player. Somebody who doesn't get mentioned in a positive light by Celtic fans these days for good reason. And by the way, somebody else has just got another one of the answers in the comments. I'll come to them in a minute if he's
I'm going blank here, Johnny.
Okay.
What have you got?
My first initial reaction was first one I put down was Sutton.
No, Sutton scored against Dundee United before he scored against Rangers.
Yeah. Maloney? Sean Maloney?
No, Maloney had scored goals before he scored against Rangers.
Bloody hell, you've got us on that one then, Phil.
Okay, I'll tell you some of the answers. So the game that's 25 years ago today, Celtic beat Rangers 2-0 in the 06-07 season. On that day, Thomas Gravesen scored his first ever goal for the club, and the second goal was scored by Kenny Miller, and that was his first goal. Kenny Miller had started the season miserably for us, couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo, couldn't score at all, and he scored his first goal against Rangers in a game. And what he gets forgetting is he really hammed up the celebrations, like proper, like, badge kissing and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, but then remember what happened a few years later when he went back to Rangers, and then suddenly he was all Mr. I love Rangers and stuff like that. And it's like, you just love yourself, mate. That's what you love, money. That's all you love. But yeah, Thomas Gravesen and Kenny Miller are correct answers. Now, another one, I'm going to bring it up here because this one is a real oddity. StuTube got it. Badr El Kaddouri, his only goal for the club was against Rangers in a 4-2 loss in the 2011-12 season. We could beat Ibrox, and he hit one from outside the box that Alan McGregor fumbled into the net. So Badr El Kaddouri is one. It was the only goal he would score for us in a short 6-month loan spell. And the other one,
I can't even remember him.
Yeah, Moroccan left back that we brought in on loan from Dynamo Kiev. But yeah, it was Lennon's second season. He was only there for about 6 months, and then he was off-ski because Izagiri got injured early that season, but Kaddouri wasn't the answer, and Charlie Mulgrew just went to another level that season, and Kaddouri was finished. But yeah, he did score. So that is his first and only goal for the club was against Rangers. Now the other one, the centre back that I was talking about, it's not Boyata. Some people are saying Thomas Rogner. It's not Thomas Rogner. He scored in his first goal was in a League Cup semi against Aberdeen in 2011 season. The other one is a Scandinavian centre back. Is Eric Sviatchenko.
Oh, right, yeah.
The cup game that we drew 2-2 and then lost on penalties, Sviatchenko signed for us in January of that year, and his first goal for the club was an absolute power header just after half-time to get us back into the game, and that was his first goal for the club, and it was against Rangers. But yeah, so the four answers were Gravesen, Miller, El Kaddouri, and Sviatchenko. That's your four tonight. It's a hard one, that. But yeah, they're in a unique club with Lubomir Moravcik, so that's an interesting company that he's keeping there of players who scored their first goals for Celtic against Rangers. So There you go. But yeah, that wraps up the show. So in terms of Bustalgia, next week we are back into doing a full season one, and we're going back into sorry, Brown Warrior. I'm going to say his name, mate. I'm going to say it. We're going back to a Brendan Rodgers season. It's a double treble season, 2017-2018. That's the season we brought in Austin Edward on loan, and him and Dembele got to link up for a season anyway. Not as much as they could have, but again, that was down to the system that Rodgers liked to play, the old 4-2-3-1. But of course, we did get that game at Ibrox where we beat them 3-2, and the link-up play between Dembele and Edward for the winning goal is absolutely phenomenal. So we've got that to talk about, obviously wrapping up the double treble. First time that had ever been done in Scottish football history, back-to-back trebles. So we'll be talking about that one. But yeah, that is what's on the agenda there. And then after that, in terms of like Bustalgia, well, I've not announced the next 5 shows after that, so I'll need to write out what they're going to be in terms of like the next month following that. But yeah, that's what's happening there. In terms of the bus over the weekend, so there's no post-match pitch because Celtic aren't playing just now because it's an international break. So Russell had said something last night. He might appear on Saturday night and might do a show on his own, but he'll come up with something over the weekend. Sunday Blair should be on as well. It'll be Regan. I believe Regan's back for that one. But I think Mark might not be available, but the Sunday Blair should happen. And then we'll be back to Monday again. It'll be everyone's favourite day of the week. But yeah, we'll be back to Monday where Russell and Jonathan will be bringing the Monday Club. So yeah, that wraps up our Lubo show. So Liam, have you enjoyed going down memory lane talking about Lubomir Moravcik?
Absolutely loved it. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Johnny. It's been brilliant. Really enjoyed
Johnny,
it.
you happy to be back on the bus for Bustalgia? You enjoyed the Lubo retrospective?
Oh, yeah. You kind of beat a nice wander down memory lane, mate, you know.
Oh, yes, indeed. So, we'll wrap it up there. And Moravcik, so thanks everyone for tuning in. And remember, of course, as Russell likes, I like to say all that good stuff. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, share, all that stuff as well, because it helps the channel massively. And hey, if you want to become a member as well, you can do that. But all the content remains free. Oh, William's out of here, man. He is gone. So with that being said, no worries. Right, Moravcik, guys. Catch you all later. Cheers.
Cheers.
The seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that?